youth employment in the United Kingdom has not reached its pre-financial crash levels in any single year since, and there has been a sharp rise in recent years in the number of young people not in education, employment or training. And that is why we're investing an additional £2.5 billion over the next 3 years into the Youth Guarantee and the Growth and Skills Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Transport Committee's Buses Connecting Communities inquiry heard the significant impact that public transport connectivity has on unemployment. That's especially the case for young people in North Norfolk. It's a vicious cycle. Poor connectivity creates poor prospects and young people leave to start their careers elsewhere. How will the Secretary of State work with his colleagues across government to make sure that young people in rural communities don't face extra barriers to unemployment than their urban peers? And will he commit to making sure rural young people have a fair opportunity to thrive?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe the honourable member raises an important issue. Whenever I discuss youth unemployment and opportunity with MPs, they often raise transport links as being a barrier. We are capping single bus fares at £3 rather. Yes, indeed. On thousands of routes in England outside London until March 2027. But I believe there is more that we can and should do, because he's right that connectivity is really important to link to opportunity.
Motion to call over.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, for his answer and the work that he's leading on for young people. But I recently visited a Job Centre Plus to meet the team, but also to see some of the fantastic work that they are already doing in getting our young people into work. But what has struck me was I had to visit a neighbouring constituency because we don't have our own in Battersea. However, in some cases, my constituents are having to take not one, not two, but 3 buses to get to that job centre, where there is a perfectly good job centre in Wandsworth. So can I ask my right honourable friend, what steps is he taking to ensure that we are removing all the barriers so transport and travel isn't a challenge to our young people getting into work?
Can I thank my honourable friend not only for her question but for the wonderful work that she has done and the advice that she's given me on closing the disability employment gap and on championing the rights of partially sighted people. On her question on access, it is important. And alongside our job centre network, we have mobile job centre vans. And of course, over the next few years, we will be opening 360 youth hubs to get services to young people where they are in the local community.
Shadow Minister Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over 700,000 young people are now out of work. That's up 100,000 year on year, with the youth unemployment rate now at over 16%, higher than at any point during the pandemic. As this is likely to be the ministerial team's final question time, will the Secretary of State reflect on the damage the Employment Rights Act and national insurance increases have had on youth unemployment? Because behind those figures, there is a story of a young person not earning or not learning. They don't need yet more billion-pound government schemes. They need a growing economy with businesses that want to hire them. Will the next government finally deliver this?
Well,
Mr. Speaker, we have the second fastest growing economy in the G7. We have 400,000 more people in work than we did last year, and the number of young people in employment is up by 74,000 since the election. In the whole 14 years in which his party were in power, it went up by only 1,000.
We come to Liberal Democrat spokesperson Steve Darling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In deprived coastal communities such as Torbay, the NHS or DWP can make up a significant part of the job offer, including entry-level jobs for young people. It was therefore disturbing last week that almost 5,500 jobs are seeking to move or could be at risk of redundancy across the United Kingdom. In Torquay, there are 130 jobs at Cotswold House with no prospect of being moved to another DWP location. Will the Minister meet with me to discuss these closures of these offices and how young people can be helped into employment through employment with the DWP? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that the DWP does play a role as a local employer, but it's also important that we deliver this service as efficiently as possible on behalf of the taxpayer. We get the maximum value for money for doing it. With regard to his request for a meeting, there has been an offer of a meeting with a minister from the department, and I hope that he takes that up.
Bradley Thomas.
Number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. The employment rate is 78.4% in rural areas compared to 74.8% in urban areas, with job opportunities in agriculture, forestry, fishing, scientific and technical sectors. Under this government, economic inactivity amongst people aged 16 and over in rural areas has fallen by 0.8%. And through the new Jobs and Careers Service, we are providing more outreach in rural areas, including job centre vans, bringing employment support directly into rural communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the picture that the Minister paints is not one that I recognise, and it's not one that is recognised by businesses in my constituency. Rural job opportunities have gone down, rural unemployment is up, and businesses routinely quote to me that the increased cost of employment under this government has directly contributed towards their inability to continue recruiting at a time when they would like to. Does the Minister recognise this, and will the Minister impart on the next Prime Minister the importance of a change of course?
Minister.
Well, the question was about rural areas, and it might be just interesting for the honourable member to reflect on that under the last government, the number of jobs in agriculture, key sector in rural areas, fell by 50,000 under that government, and under this government, it's risen by 5,000. So it might just be helpful for him to reflect on that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The abolition of the two-child limit. Oh, number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, don't worry. Who wants it? 4.
Mr. Speaker, being in work is the best way to avoid poverty. The benefit cap does give a modest but significant incentive to start work and then to progress in work. Some people are not able to work, so the cap doesn't apply to people out of work on disability or caring benefits, but for others it remains in place.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The abolition of the two-child limit by this government was a key step in cutting child poverty, but some of the poorest families still see their benefit capped, and there are shockingly high levels of child poverty in parts of my constituency. 70% of children are growing up in poverty in Arundel ward and 61% in Princes Park. The cap hits families with high needs, 2/3 are single-parent families, more than half of whom had a child under 5, and over a quarter a child under 2. They are often forced to turn to food banks to survive as a result, and the Trustful Trust provided 1,300 food parcels to children in Liverpool Wavertree last year. Will the government build on the abolition of the two-child limit and review the benefit cap to ensure that families with very young children are protected from poverty?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we'll certainly keep the policy under review, but at the moment there are too many people in poverty through being out of work, and the cap does help by increasing the incentive to work. She's right to highlight the scrapping of the two-child limit. 2 million children will gain overall from that. There are 50,000 capped households who won't see a gain, but a very large number will. Perhaps one other point I should just make to my honourable friend is that the childcare support within universal credit is not affected by the cap, and so that's a further help.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House of Commons Library, quoting the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, report that child poverty rates in Scotland remain much lower than in England, 23% compared to 31%, due at least in part to the Scottish Child Payment. Can I ask the Minister, in light of this government's mission to tackle the scourge of child poverty, can he describe what measures the government are planning in addition to the abolition of the two-child cap? For example, scrapping the infamous bedroom tax.
Minister.
Well, he's right that the scrapping of the two-child limit is the key measure. That's going to lead to 450,000 children moving out of poverty. Other measures in our child poverty strategy that we published last year will increase that number by another 100,000. That is going to be very, very welcome progress in Scotland as well as in the rest of the UK, and we'll be keeping the policies under review.
Secretary of State Helen Whitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, there we heard it a moment ago, Labour backbencher calling for yet more money to be spent on benefits. What we should be doing here is talking about all the households who are avoiding the cap. 100,000 households get over 50...
Sorry. We've got to be very careful on language use, especially when you're on the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 100,000 households get over £50,000 in benefits. 16,000 households get over £60,000 in benefits. That gives them the same income as the top 10% of earners in this country. British people are sick and tired of footing the bill for Benefit Street and seeing welfare claimants living lives of luxury at their expense. The MP for Makerfield has called for more collaborative politics. So will the honourable gentleman adopt our plan to toughen up the benefits cap and save £1 billion off the benefits bill?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if there is a plan, I'll be very interested to see it. We certainly haven't seen any details of it. The honourable member's comments are a further example of her expressing dissatisfaction with the system left behind by her government for 14 years. We're reforming the system, making sure it's doing the job we need it to do, and we'll carry on with that programme of reform.
Alex Burrows-Curtis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Question number 4.
Five.
It's 5. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to answer questions 5, 9, 16 and 17 together. We are making strong progress in expanding youth hubs with around 130 already in operation across Great Britain. In March, I announced the locations that we want to open this year, and I've just announced a further 180 locations for the following 2 years. The areas involved include Harlow, Cardiff, Dartford and East Hertfordshire. They will see new youth hubs open in local sports clubs, libraries and other venues. And wherever MPs get a youth hub, I encourage them to work with their job centres and with local organisations to confirm venues and begin delivery of these important services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for that brilliant news, and I hope that they will focus on mathematics skills as well. I could do with some of that. Young people were left behind by the previous Conservative government, with 13.2% in South East Wales not in employment, education or training. So youth hubs offer personalised wraparound employment, skills and wellbeing support in targeted areas. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that the new youth facilities in Cardiff Football Club and Ely, in my constituency, with proper consultation, are a clear demonstration of Labour fixing the mess left by the party opposite and giving young people the best opportunity in life?
My honourable friend is right, and thank you to Cardiff Football Club for being a partner. We are supporting nearly 1 million young people and creating up to 500,000 opportunities for jobs and training. And we're doing this by providing incentives for employers to hire, promoting apprenticeships and delivering a whole range of targeted programmes. And on these youth hubs, there is another important point. They are not just available to people already signing on and on benefits. There is a significant proportion of young NEETs who are not claiming benefits, and the youth hubs are open to all of them too.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you'll be aware, my constituency of Harlow is full of incredibly talented young people, some of whom I had the pleasure to meet at a recent awards ceremony at Harlow College. Alan Milburn's report makes it clear that young people are being let down by a broken system and deep-seated barriers rather than their own ambition. So can the Secretary of State outline how a youth club in my constituency of Harlow will make a massive difference to young people in Harlow to ensure they get these skills that local employers are looking for and build on the great great work done by Harlow College.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the honourable member is a great champion of Harlow, the place, and the people of Harlow, and I believe that he will make maximum use of the Youth Hub to advance opportunity for young people in his constituency. We are committed to the young people of Harlow, to giving them the best possible chance in life. And I should say I recently visited the Netherlands, which has a youth inactivity rate significantly lower than ours, and youth hubs are an important part of their effort to do that.
Josh Dean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And there's already much excitement in my community that East Herts will be home to one of the new youth hubs being rolled out by this Labour government. Now, I represent a semi-rural area where young people often have to make significant journeys across or even outside of the constituency to access the services and support they need. Given that rurality can be a barrier to finding support and work, can the Minister say a little more about how the Department's model for youth hubs will account for this, and whether a youth hub has to be in one location or if it could be split across multiple venues if the interest is there?
Well, my honourable friend raises an important point, and we recognise, as I said earlier, that transport can be a real barrier for young people in rural areas. So we've designed youth hubs to be flexible and work with local partners to tailor delivery to what works best in each area. For example, this can include offering more flexible opening hours or choosing locations that align with local transport patterns. The whole idea is to meet people where they are in the community and get services to them in a way that is the easiest possible for them to use.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Constituents in Dartford are also very pleased that our area has been chosen as one of the local authorities to receive a youth hub. We have a growing population of under 25s, all of whom are talented, enthusiastic and want to get into the workplace. Could the Secretary of State perhaps set out when that hub is likely to open, what sort of services are going to be available and what difference it's going to make to the lives of young people in Dartford?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Dartford Youth Hub is scheduled to open in the next financial year, and it will bring together a range of support. These youth hubs include things like mental health support, housing support, skills and career opportunities, all in one place. And the whole idea is that people do not live their lives according to departmental boundaries, and the way that we help them should understand that and bring these departmental boundaries together. And the evaluation that we've done so far shows that young people at youth hubs are more likely to progress towards employment, and 2/3 of them reported that the support had met their specific needs.
Dame Caroline Dining.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can't help thinking that youth hubs are trying to fix a problem of their own creation. The amount of people, youth unemployed people in my Gosport constituency has gone up 23% since his government took office in July 2024. Can I just let that figure sink in? 23%. He should be absolutely ashamed of what he's done to young people in the Gosport constituency. And why? How has he done it? He's done it by making sure that all the businesses that give young people the first foot on the employment ladder, hospitality, childcare, hair and beauty, have been poleaxed by the actions of this government. And only this morning we hear, thank you, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister in waiting talks about the importance of creating growth. When will they realise only businesses create growth? When will they get out of their way and let them do it?
Mr. Speaker, as Alan Milburn pointed out in his recent report, the UK's NEET crisis is much more long-term and deep-seated than any decisions taken in the last few years. There are 400,000 more people in work than there were last year. The number of young people in employment is up by 74,000 since the election. It only went up by 1,000 during our party's 14 years in power. And from tomorrow, we will open the process of hiring incentives of £3,000 for any business that wants to take on a young person who's been out of work for 6 months or more. So shame is not the emotion I feel, it is passion for opening up work and opportunity to more young people, and that is what we are doing.
So Julian Lewis.
With the impeccable timing of an Olympic medalist and world record beater, the inspirational Fatima Whitbread is in Parliament today in Room U, Portcullis House till 4 p.m, stressing the importance for people like herself brought up
in the care system of wraparound local authority hubs working and including the educational, sport, police and charity sectors. Will a member, preferably more than one, of the ministerial team take the trouble to leave this chamber when the questions come to an end and go over and talk to Fatima about her very interesting and constructive ideas in this important field?
Seriously, I'm not quite sure. It was a very good twist on getting to the question, but go on.
Congratulations to Fatima Whitbread, a great British hero, a great Olympic hero. He's right about the importance of opportunity for care leavers, of wraparound care. We're very keen to do that. We don't just want to help young people into work, but to help them after they've found work. And we'll certainly try to make sure that a member of the ministerial team calls into the event that you mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the key routes to employment that youth hubs can provide are supported internships. Will the Minister congratulate young Somerset for the number of people for whom the education system has been a failure, but they've nonetheless been helped into secure employment by supported internships? And would someone from the ministerial team meet with me and with young Somerset to discuss the cuts in the funding and the reduction of those supported internships?
Well, I'm very happy to congratulate young Somerset on supported internships. I'm sure he'll get a meeting with somebody in the ministerial team. And as for his call for more funding, well, that has to sit alongside the many calls that we have for more funding in this House every day.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I recently met with Voices for Impact's Youth Advisory Group in Glengormley. Unfortunately, the funding for their youth centre has been cut to one night per week. What encouragement can the Secretary of State give those young people that youth hubs that he's talking about can be extended to Northern Ireland?
Well, I believe that these youth hubs are applicable to every part of the United Kingdom. Well done to the organisation in Glengormley that he mentioned. Of course, the Northern Ireland Executive has its own funding too, and many matters are devolved. But wherever young people are in the United Kingdom, I want them to know that this is a government that wants to see more opportunity for them, more work, and a helping hand to get them on that first vital career, that first step on the career ladder, which is often a good first job.
Andrew Pate.
Question number 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
So stay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the matter of youth hubs, as I said earlier this spring, we announced the expansion to all planned areas and the launch of phase 1 of the jobs guarantee for the long-term unemployed, first in 6 areas and later to the whole country. From today, we're rolling out expanded employment support for young people on universal credit to all job centres in Britain. And as I mentioned, from tomorrow, we are opening the Youth Jobs Grant, which will give employers a £3,000 hiring bonus to take on a young person who's been out of work for 6 months or more.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Youth Guarantee will play a crucial part in a city like Peterborough, where for too long, too many young people have been starting their adult life on benefits without the skills necessary. Just this month, the Right Honourable Friend for East Ham cut the ribbon on the bridge, a new partnership between Peterborough College, Inspire to Unite and businesses to create more opportunities for young people. But we want to go further, Mr. Speaker. Working with Inspire to Ignite, we are bringing together businesses, civic sector, charities and others to launch the 3% Club to cut NEET level to 3% in Cambridgeshire and give young people the opportunities they need. Will my Right Honourable Friend explain more how the department can support frontline innovation and partnerships like this? And will she meet me, or will they meet me with Inspire to Unite and listen to the voices of young people as we turn this situation around?
So stay.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his commitment to expanding opportunity for young people in his constituency and reducing the NEET youth rate. As he knows, I was pleased to open the Peterborough Youth Hub some months ago. My department is working with Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's Strategic Authority on the Youth Guarantee Trailblazer. Congratulations to Inspire to Ignite. I value positive feedback from the Minister's visit to the bridge site, and I'll ensure that he gets a meeting with a Minister in the department to discuss these issues further.
Rishi, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
my local businesses like Labman in Stokesley, Barker's and Sam Turner's in Northallerton and Metcalfe Farms in Leyburn are all excellent at providing opportunities for young people through apprenticeships. Now, I note that the government has introduced a very welcome hiring incentive for the smallest businesses to take on young people. So could I ask the Minister first to congratulate my local businesses that are doing just that, but also to learn the lessons from the Kickstart scheme, which I believe the guarantee is somewhat modelled on, where we discovered that it's better to have a very easy application process for these smallest businesses to speed uptake, but also to make sure they're aware of these initiatives, because they are very beneficial, but we need to make sure that they are aware and then do take them up to benefit young people.
Well, may I thank the right honourable gentleman and wish him commiserations for whatever has left him reliant on his crutches today. I'm very happy to congratulate the businesses that he mentioned in his constituency, and he raises a very serious point, which is that it is important not only to come up with the right policy, but to make this simple for businesses to use. That's something I have stressed to my officials. It is important that this is simple to apply for. The money will be given in 2 instalments, one in the 2nd month and one in the 5th month, to make sure that the hiring is sustained. But I entirely agree with him. Good policy should be matched by a simple application process.
Shadow Minister Rebecca Smith.
I'm not surprised that Labour ministers and backbenchers are patting themselves on the back for their youth guarantee, but it is a sticking plaster solution to a problem of their own creation. Rather than U-turn on their triple whammy of increased business costs, higher national insurance, higher wages and higher business rates, the government would rather use the state to subsidise jobs for the very same young people businesses can no longer afford to employ. So will the Secretary of State finally concede that no amount of government work programmes can undo the damage that they have done to the labour market and young people's opportunities?
Well, I thank the honourable lady for her question, and Alan Milburn in his review considered this and said the UK's NEET crisis is much more long-term and deep-seated than any decisions taken in the last few years. And as I said earlier, there are 400,000 more people in work this year than last year. The number of young people in employment is up since the election, and our policies today are designed to help business rally to the cause of getting more young people into work. And that is why I am pleased that we're bringing forward hiring incentives of £3,000 to help businesses take on a young unemployed person who's been out of work for 6 months or more. And there is a good reason to target this group with opportunity, because the longer people are on these benefits, the greater the consequences they can have for their lives in the long term. Their whole future is in front of them, and that's why it's right that we help them.
John Mill.
Question number 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government is committed to improving data sharing with local authorities. As part of our endeavours to improve services, we are taking forward work with local authorities on the Identifying Local Vulnerability project. This work will support enhanced data sharing across local and central government. Work has already taken place to establish customer needs and ways of working. Future stages will focus on ensuring the best technological solution is deployed.
John Mill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister knows all too well that DWP's shortcomings can end in tragedy. Errol Graham was a benefits claimant who starved to death without heating, electricity or adequate food. His local council, his housing association, his GP and the DWP all held information highlighting risk. If only they'd been able to share it, he would be alive today. ILOV can show the whole picture, but the trial has faced delay after delay. Will the Minister therefore commit to a firm delivery deadline?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman is absolutely correct to recognise the importance of this work. Data sharing with local authorities is essential, particularly working on homelessness prevention, young people not in education, employment and training, supporting families. There is a rich seam here. If we get this work right, I can tell him that we expect to see early benefits from the rollout of this scheme by 2027.
Whereas, Mr. Speaker, in January, Storm Goretti slammed into Cornwall, bringing down tree lines and cutting off individual communities. I was shocked to hear of the story of an elderly couple who were trapped in their bedroom. Their stair lift had broken and villagers were winching food to them for the weekend. Can I ask the Ministry what lessons have been learned in relation to the vulnerability project from Storm Goretti?
Minister.
Well, can I share his shock and horror at that particular episode? If he wants to send me further detail of the specific case, I will ensure that it is fed into that work. But one of the particular uses that I would envisage from the data sharing available would be recognising where there is a particular and urgent need perhaps for access to services such as the Crisis Resilience Fund. But as I say, if he writes to me in more detail, I will make sure that any lessons that can be learned are fed in.
Ian Byrne.
Question number 8, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? And the Department publishes data on universal credit and keeps labour market trends under review. In January 26, 3.1 million people were on universal credit in employment, representing 37.8% of all claimants. Of course, universal credit is designed to support people into and in work, allowing individuals to move into employment while continuing to receive support as their earnings increase.
Speaker, as the proud parliamentary lead for the Right to Food Commission, I've heard powerful testimony from workers employed by large profitable companies across the UK who are paid so little they are driven to hardship, hunger and dependence on universal credit just to put food on the table. The DWP assesses 1.2 million people on universal credits to work into their capacity, their income topped up by the state because the wages are so low. This figure has increased threefold in 6 years. Does the Minister agree that taxpayers should not be left to subsidise poverty paid by companies employing 250 plus? And will the government require these companies to report on how many of their workers rely on universal credit because their wages are so low?
Minister.
Well, can I first of all acknowledge what my honourable friend is saying and also commend him for his work on the Right to Food Commission. And I do know that there are many people who work very hard in sectors like retail and care doing important work, but they don't earn enough. So at the end of the week, there isn't sufficient money and they rely on food banks. And I want to invite my honourable friend to come and talk to me about this so we can discuss what we might be able to do about it.
Burnham.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The University of Cumbria shows that average hill farm incomes are less than the national minimum wage in our communities and beyond. And indeed, farmers of all kinds and small businesses often cannot claim universal credit at all, despite their poverty, because the way universal credit is assessed on the basis of monthly income, not on the basis of what might be a fluctuating annual income. Will she meet with me and farmers' representatives so we can make sure those farmers in poverty get the support they deserve?
Minister.
Yes, of course. I'm very happy to meet with the right honourable gentleman.
John Whitney.
Question 10, Mr Speaker.
Who's up for it?
Mr Speaker, we've been reminded already this afternoon of the experiences of Fatima Whitbread. Work is underway across government to give care leavers access to the skills and wider support for sustained employment and career progression. Lower universal credit rates for younger claimants strengthen work incentives and encourage increased earnings over time.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This government is rightly committed to breaking down barriers to opportunity, but care leavers still face disproportionate challenges as they move into independent adulthood. Will the Minister commit to reviewing the universal credit age-related rates for care leavers with a view to ensuring that all 18 to 24-year-old care leavers receive the same rate of UC as those aged 25 and over?
Minister.
I think, Mr Speaker, it's very important that we don't weaken the incentives for care leavers to start work and once they're in work to progress in work. At the moment, 40% of young care leavers are not in employment, education or training. A horrific statistic. So our response is to provide tailored Job Centre Plus support. The new Youth Jobs Grant that my right honourable friend has referred to, £3,000, will be available from tomorrow. Care leavers under 25 are eligible for the one-bedroom local housing allowance rate rather than the shared accommodation rate, so there is a financial benefit there, but our focus is, I think rightly, on support into work.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answer, as always. In relation to Northern Ireland, when it comes to care leavers, I think Sometimes they really are the untold heroes of the work that they do, and many of us in all of our communities understand the deliveries of care that they give. And in relation to young people in Northern Ireland, has the Minister had any opportunity to talk to the relevant Minister there to ensure that we in Northern Ireland can also move forward with the speed that the Minister seems to be indicating? I understand there's 19,000 young people between 16 and 24 in Northern Ireland without any employment. Maybe there's an opportunity here to do better.
Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'll be delighted to have that conversation. I do speak regularly to the Minister in Northern Ireland about matters in my portfolio, and I'll be happy to cover this one in the next conversation.
Rachel Muskell.
Mr Speaker, number 11, please.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend for her interest in this area. Through our child poverty strategy, we are already taking substantial action, including the expansion of free school meals eligibility, the removal of the two-child limit and the introduction of the £1 billion Crisis and Resilience Fund. Actions in this strategy will lift 550,000 children out of poverty in 29-30, and removal of the two-child limit could benefit around 1,650 children in York Central.
Rachel Muskell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Lifting children out of poverty will be this government's greatest legacy. However, we know that around 4 million children will remain in poverty, and therefore to go further is really important. Gordon Brown last year, the former Prime Minister, suggested a levy on the gambling and betting industry to raise £3 billion, but also lift another 500,000 children out of poverty. Will she ensure that we do even more so we have a greater legacy, but also ensure that those young people's lives are changed forever because of the decisions of this government?
Minister.
Like my honourable friend, I'm very proud of what the child poverty strategy will deliver, but I think it may be worth just reflecting on what the Chancellor said in the budget about child poverty at the end of last year. She said, because I am tackling fraud and error in our welfare system, because I'm cracking down on tax avoidance, and because I'm reforming gambling taxation, I can announce today, fully costed and fully funded, the removal of the two-child limit in full from April. So I hope that reassures her that that was taken into account in the decisions that were taken by the Chancellor.
Joy Franklin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And it's interesting to hear the Minister's comments in relation to the last question. And I just wonder, in assessing progress on reducing levels of child poverty, what assessment has been made in terms of those hidden pockets of deprivations in places such as my own constituency of Guildford, where overall child poverty after housing costs is 13.2%, but in some of the neighbourhoods in my constituency, including the one where I was previously a councillor, it rises to 50%. I continue to find that deeply shocking, and it presents very specific challenges in areas like mine. And also, what steps is the government taking to ensure that children living in these pockets are not overlooked by their own policy?
Here, here. Minister.
I think the Honourable Lady raises a very important point. This child poverty strategy is a 10-year strategy. We're very clear that we need to be, as ministers across government, looking at all areas of what government can do to address child poverty. I think there is a key measure as well around deep material poverty that we need to look at. But I would also say it's really important that we work with local councils, we worked with combined authorities and mayors as well, because there's some really good work already going on in local areas to address those pockets that might in the overall picture be missed, but local areas are very well aware of where more work needs to happen.
Chris Moore.
Question 13, please, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Losing a loved one is deeply distressing. DWP provides support through the bereavement support payment, a tax-free lump sum with up to 18 monthly payments for eligible partners. Help with funeral costs is available through the funeral expenses payment for those receiving income-related benefits, and additional support that may be available includes the bereavement run-on in universal credit, extending support after the death of a partner, child or another adult in the household.
Chris Moore.
Thank the Minister for his answer. He will probably know a petition calling for reform of bereavement support payments has now passed 100,000 signatures, backed by Way, Gingerbread and Cruise. Many of my families in Redditch are also among those affected. Will the Minister engage with Widows Fight UK before the parliamentary debate to ensure that all families facing this unbearable heartbreak have the support they deserve?
Minister.
I recognise the strong interest in this issue that my honourable friend has outlined. I was aware of the petition, but also of the campaigning work that he has done in this space. I'm very happy to receive any information that the organisation wishes to send to me in advance of the debate on the petition, and I look forward to participating in that.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. I recently met with bereaved families in my constituency of Stratford-on-Avon, including Joe, and they tell me that after while they are grieving, the distress to know that the bereavement support payment ends after just 18 months, despite the rising cost of living since it was introduced in 2017 has not been uprated for 2026-27. So will the government commit to uprate this support payment in line with inflation and reviewing the 18 months limit?
Minister.
Can I thank her for her question? She raises an important point. BSP is reviewed annually as part of the wider uprating process, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to make that commitment today. But on the specific question of why BSP is limited to 18 months, it is designed to support the acute period following bereavement. Longer-term financial support is delivered through the wider welfare system for those who are eligible, including universal credit, of course child benefit, but other forms of local support where that may be appropriate.
Andrew Rossen.
Question 14, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government is committed to supporting British pensioners to enjoy a comfortable retirement after a lifetime of work. That is why we are raising the state pension throughout this Parliament by the triple lock. In April, this saw the state pension increase by 4.8%, boosting the level of the new state pension by £575 a year.
I thank the Minister for his reply, but he will know that in my borough of Havering, we have the second largest number of older people in the entirety of Greater London. Nearly a quarter of my constituents are within that age bracket, and they are losing out. The winter fuel allowance, I know the government's policy has changed, but that frightened them, whether Labour is really on their side. Will he assure my constituents that the next Labour administration will not target pensioners, will actually give them the respect they deserve and ensure that they have a happy and healthy retirement?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question. I can give him the assurance he asked for, which is this Labour administration, like all Labour administrations, is on pensioners' side. But of course, he only defected earlier this year, so he was a Conservative MP during all 14 years of the disastrous party opposite's last government, a government that saw pensioner poverty rise and left 1 in 5 of those aged over 75 on NHS waiting lists. That is what letting down pensioners looks like.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister set out what plans he has to make sure today's workers, so tomorrow's pensioners, enjoy a decent retirement?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. It's a very important question. We need to make sure that those retiring in 2050 can look forward to the same kind of comfortable retirements that many, not all, but many of today's pensioners do enjoy. And the honest answer is that we're not on track for that at the moment. This government's taking a two-stage approach, driving up returns on pension savings now. That's what the Pension Scheme Act that passed recently does, but then doing the longer-term work with the Pensions Commission, looking at exactly this. How do we make sure that tomorrow's workers can enjoy comfortable retirements? And I promise they'll bring forward their report early next year.
Mark Garnier, Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Pensions Minister likes to spend a lot of time criticising the previous government for its actions on pensioners, and also at the same time spends an awful lot of time talking up his legacy on helping pensioners. But his actions just simply do not reflect the narrative. So far, he has capped salary sacrifice, there's been delays in the pension dashboard, we've had retrospective changes in inheritance tax pension spots, and they're chasing hard up pensions, as we heard, for their winter fuel allowance. And all of this creates uncertainty amongst savers and pensioners alike. So, I'll repeat the question of my honourable friend. Is the Pension Minister hopeful that his successor will do a better job of looking after pensioners?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I am incredibly hopeful that this government is doing a much better job than the previous government in supporting pensioners, not only driving up the state pension, but getting on with the much-delayed reforms of our defined contribution pension system that the last government just left on ice, and coming forward with something much more important, because the biggest betrayal of older generations in Britain today is the state of our National Health Service left by the party opposite.
John Cooper.
Question number 15, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Overall levels of fraud and error are the lowest since the pandemic at 3.2%, compared to the peak of 4.3% in financial year end 2022. This reduction of a quarter demonstrates sustained progress of our fraud and error measures, and building on this success, we have set a new ambition to reduce the rate to 2.8% by 28-29, the lowest cross-welfare overpayment rate since tax credits were introduced in 2003.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I thank the Minister for his answer there. But in Scotland, benefit fraud has effectively been decriminalised with a vanishingly small number of prosecutions. Given that DWP actually continues to have a role in Scotland administering some benefits despite devolution, what can the Department do to tackle fraud in Scotland? But it's happening here with a two-tier system in Scotland.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. If the honourable gentleman has specific concerns about the way in which benefits are being administered and fraud being investigated through the powers of the Scottish Parliament, I'd very much appreciate it if he could write to me on that. But what I would say to him is that in some instances this will be because the way in which both the Department and indeed Scottish Government counterparts will be investigating fraud means that we are now teed up to intervene at an earlier stage where a number of the issues can be less serious and where we are able to detect and act at a much earlier stage. That is beneficial in terms of reducing fraud, but also for claimants too.
Tom Collins and Topicals. Thursday.
Since our last session of these questions, Mr Speaker, both Alan Milburn and the Pensions Commission have published their respective interim reports on young people and on the current state of saving for retirement. I look forward to receiving their final reports later in the year. Earlier this month, I visited the Netherlands to see the impressive work of the Dutch government to ensure youth inactivity is a last resort, and I think there's much that we can learn. And finally, Mr Speaker, I'd like to put on record my thanks and best wishes to Sir Peter Schofield, the outgoing Permanent Secretary of the Department, who leaves after over 8 years at the helm of the DWP, and I look forward to working with his successor, Dame Sarah Healy, who will be joining us as the new Permanent Secretary shortly.
Tom Collins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This government has set out to change culture across the DWP to make it far more focused on people, not faceless processes. But in my constituency of Worcester, people are finding that when DWP services have made mistakes, the reaction continues to be delay, denial and sometimes outright refusal to fix errors. What is the Secretary of State doing to improve the attitudes, values and approaches of frontline client-facing services?
Well, Mr Speaker, it is important to treat customers properly and fairly, and to remember that the DWP deals with some of the most vulnerable people in society. The Department does take safeguarding seriously. We have increased the training, in particular for those involved in health assessments, and if there are specific cases that my honourable friend wishes to draw to my attention, then I encourage him to provide me with the details.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I would like to associate myself and our side of the House with the comments of the Secretary of State about the outgoing Permanent Secretary of the Department of Work and Pensions. I am sorry that this may be my last exchange with the Secretary of State as we await the coronation of the King in the North and the appointment of his new team. I do hope that the Right Honourable Gentleman isn't sacked for telling the truth about his fellow Labour MPs who just want to put up taxes to pay for more benefits. Does he think that our next Prime Minister will have the courage to take on those Labour MPs and bring down the benefits bill, or will he bottle it like his predecessor?
Bottle it?
Well, Mr Speaker, I enjoy our exchanges, and I welcome the Shadow Secretary of State's giving me the opportunity to point out that in the past year, I have said time and time again that we have to change the question the system asks from what benefits are you entitled to how do we help you change your life. And that is why the debate on how we reform the system has changed to one where we are putting opportunity and work at the centre of what we do. That's what we do with the Youth Guarantee, and that's what we will continue to do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I heard no commitment there that the benefits bill is going to come down any time soon. They can change their leader, but they are still the same old welfare party. The MP for Makerfield told us this morning he's going to bring Manchesterism to the whole country. In Manchester, he is spending nearly £750,000 on helping asylum seekers claim benefits. British people are tired of seeing their hard-earned money spent on handouts to foreigners. We cannot be a cash machine for the world. Does the Secretary of State think that this is a good use of taxpayers' money?
Of course, people should only get benefits if they are properly entitled and qualified for them. And all of this has to be underpinned by us being as caring and as passionate about wealth creation as we are about fair wealth distribution. That is what unites Labour people. We are asking the right question. She is still asking the wrong ones.
Joyce Dean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Child Maintenance Service has told one of my constituents that because the father of her children is claiming benefits, he can only pay her £6.73 per week, even though they are aware that he has additional hidden income of £97,000. This is sadly not an isolated case, so can the Minister set out for my constituent what the Government is doing to strengthen enforcement so that these cases are treated as a criminal matter?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? It is an important point that he raises. The Child Maintenance Service is committed to ensuring separated parents support their children financially and ensuring that the assessment reflects the parents' true income. I'm not familiar with the specifics of the case that he realises. My general view would be that enforcement powers are adequate, but case complexity is often the challenge in proving where money is owed, but I recognise that he is raising a specific case, and if he wants to write to me, I'd be very happy to look into it further on his behalf.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Steve Darling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to welcome the Government accepting a finding from the Liz Sace review into carers allowance overpayments in respect of the underuse of waivers, bearing in mind that these groups often are most vulnerable, these households in society. Has the review into use of waivers been undertaken, and what changes have been given to frontline staff?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are working through, as the honourable member knows, the cases of those who were required to repay an overpayment over recent years. That I'm getting an update every week on the number of cases that have been gone through and those who've had an overpayment reduced or cancelled. I'll be very happy to give him further information about the progress of that work.
Providing support for young people to access the world of work has never been more crucial, but the success of youth hubs will depend upon their ability to connect with, to be useful to and to understand the need of employers. So can my right honourable friend tell me what steps the youth hubs will take to ensure that they are communicating with and understand the needs of businesses?
So State.
My honourable friend raises a really important point. This has to be a joint effort between government and employers. We had a great round table at number 10 this morning with employers committed to expanding youth opportunity. I visited Merlin, a really important business in the leisure and hospitality industry. They've agreed to take on 300 people through our youth guarantee measures. Other businesses are signing up too, and I encourage as many as possible to do so.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister should know that the triple lock, whilst remaining in place, is not as effective as it should be because of the fiscal drag. A lot of pensioners are now paying tax when they shouldn't be. The threshold has not been increased since 2021. Will he please do something for the hard-working pensioners of this country who deserve better in their retirement?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question, and I recognise the point he's making, which is to fund the NHS, which we need to do to stop letting down older generations, there are consequences for tax that affects the whole population, including pensioners. The Chancellor has set out that the level of the personal allowance will remain above the level of the new and the basic state pension, the headline rates, through this year, and in future years will ensure that we ease the administrative burden for pensioners that have small amounts of tax due.
Reference to the consultation on surplus flexibilities for defined pension schemes, the Pensions Minister has explained that trustees could offer employers surplus extraction of pension funds on condition of restoring the value of pre-97 pensions. So in drawing up the regulations, will he ensure that trustees are required to commission an independent assessment of pre-97 pension erosion, ring-fence funds to restore full pension value and restore pension value to members ahead of any surplus extraction by employers?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. She and I have discussed this on a number of occasions. She's been an important campaigner for pensioners in her constituency affected by this, while 3/4 of schemes provide some degree of pre-97 indexation. For members of those who do not, this is a very real impact. Indeed, we've discussed that with local pensioners in South Wales. Surplus reforms that this government is coming forward will make it easier for some trustees to negotiate for additional indexation. As an update to the House, we launched a consultation on this on the 10th of June, and that runs until the 2nd of September, and I'll take the Honourable Lady's comments today as an input to that consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1 in 50 Londoners, including 1 in 21 children, are homeless and living in temporary accommodation. London boroughs are spending £5 million a day on temporary accommodation. While housing costs have skyrocketed in the past 15 years, the temporary accommodation subsidy gap has remained frozen since 2011. Some councils are now struggling to fund other important areas such as social care. So will the Minister commit to urgently reviewing the temporary accommodation subsidy gap to ensure that councils are fairly reimbursed?
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the honourable member that my department is working very closely with MHCLG, looking at the problem of homelessness, what we need to do between us to address it. And I note the point that she raises, which is one of those points for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The number of young people not in employment, education or training is something that should concern us all. So I was delighted to see a new youth hub announced for Ada earlier this month. Can the Secretary of State set out how it will set young people up for success in my constituency?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. The Youth Hub will be able to help young people by treating them as human beings and bringing together holistic support, getting them into employment, including mental health, housing, essential and vocational skills. As I said, breaking down the barriers between departments, seeing them as a person, and so far 67% of young people using youth hubs report that the support had met their needs.
Adam Dance. Mr. Speaker, the Universal Credit Team admitted they made the wrong decision on if my constituent had to pay bedroom tax for a room to care for his son. But they only backdated payments to 25th of May 2025 rather than the 1st of July 2024. So can the Minister make sure my constituent gets a full refund and set out how we're going to stop future errors on universal credit decisions?
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, there is a limit on how far back applications can be backdated. But if you'd like to drop me a line with the details, I'll make sure we have a good look at the case that he's raised.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Pension Minister knows there's no retirement on a planet, so will he commit to writing to the 50 largest UK pension funds, asking them to set out their timetable for divesting from fossil fuels?
I thank my honourable friend for this. He's a consistent campaigner on these issues in this place and also in our regular meetings, and I always learn something from those conversations. I'm not going forward with exactly the suggestion he brings forward, but I agree there is more we can do, not least to provide clarity for trustees. And we're working with industry to develop guidance clarifying that fiduciary duties allow trustees investing in members' best interest to consider systemic risks, including climate change, and we'll consult later this summer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The increased PIP costs are expected to add an extra £5 billion to the welfare budget this year. As the Taxpayer Alliance highlighted, the number of households earning over $100,000 and getting PIP has doubled to 200,000 claimants. Will the Minister make an assessment of the potential merits of means testing PIP to ensure targeted support?
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, together with disabled people, we are co-producing a review of PIP to make sure it's fair and fit for the future. The review terms of reference reflect the view of successive governments that PIP should be a non-means tested cash benefit for people both in and out of work, because anybody can incur additional costs as a result of long-term ill health or disability.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Alan Milburn's Young People and Work report, Dudley Borough was sadly named as the worst performing borough in the country for tracking 16 and 17-year-olds. Over 1,000 16 and 17-year-olds, well, it was unknown whether they were working, whether they were in school, whether they were in college, or what they were doing at all. So can the Secretary of State outline what the department is doing to make sure we don't lose sight of these young people, like we've done in Dudley, and so we can give them the opportunities that they do need?
Honourable friend raises a really important point. We cannot allow young people to drop out of sight of the system. It's really important, especially 16 and 17-year-olds, where we want to see education or training participation up until the age of 18. In my visit to the Netherlands, they took this really seriously and had effort after effort to stop young people dropping out. I think there's a lot that we can learn from that and track the young people more closely.
Dr Neil Shastrihurst.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There are now over 1 million young people not in education, employment or training, the highest number in more than a decade. So when the history books are written on this period of government, does the Minister agree that the story will be of a lost generation?
Yeah. When the history books are written about this, they will show that these numbers rose by 250,000 in the last 3 years in which his party were in power, and they did precisely nothing about it. That's what the history books will show. We are responding with a youth guarantee that puts work and opportunity at the heart of welfare reform. I wish he'd done it, but he didn't, but we are.
One of my constituents is a former care leaver who's facing immense health conditions and he can no longer work. Given the lack of family and social support many care leavers experience, they're uniquely vulnerable to financial insecurity. Can the Minister confirm that the experience of care leavers are being considered as part of the TIMS review?
Minister.
Well, I mean, if the care leavers are PIP recipients, and I think that probably is the case in the example that she's given, then certainly we are considering that point. If there's particular issues she thinks we need to reflect on in the course of the review, I'll be keen to see those.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bereavement benefits have not been uprated for 10 years and simply don't recognise the lifelong impact of early bereavement on children and surviving parents. So will the Minister look again at uprating bereavement support benefits in line with inflation?
Minister.
I appreciate the point that the Honourable Lady is making. I'm not in a position from the dispatch box to confirm an uprating, but this will be considered in the usual way as part of the annual uprating process. There is a forthcoming debate in Westminster Hall in response to a petition on the adequacy of bereavement support payments, and I'm sure that she will participate fully in that debate if she's able to make the case further.
Mr. Speaker, many young people, children who are on disability living allowance, end up going on to PIP very readily. While, of course, it's important that people get support, what work is the Secretary of State doing to make sure that those young people are not written off but given every opportunity to work?
My right honourable friend raises a really important point. There should not be an automatic transition. We also have to consider the life chances of people on long-term sickness benefits, so this is worthy of something considering, while always, of course, making sure that people who are in need of disability benefits get the help and support that they need to lead as full a life as possible.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited Grimsby Job Centre and met with Nick Gregory and Joe Corney, two excellent officials. One of the things they were able to information they were able to give me is the opening of a youth hub in Scunthorpe, which will serve many parts of my constituency. But many of the young people who go will be from the rural areas. What new initiatives are the government planning to provide work for young people in rural areas?
Minister.
Well, can I also agree with the honourable gentleman's comments about the DWP officials in our area? They are excellent. And absolutely, youth hubs are going to be in areas where we're working with, say, sports clubs or other organisations. And we're also looking at whether we can use mobile buses to get youth hubs out to rural areas in particular. So I think that this is a conversation that we can perhaps carry on outside here to see what we can do.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before being elected to this place, I spent many years looking at how we could tackle the NEET crisis. Does the Minister agree with me that we should be ambitious for our young people and have an aim to have 0% NEETs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've discussed this with the Honourable Lady. There are great schools that I have visited that have a record of NEET 0, and they do it by paying attention to employability and work right from year 7. So I believe there is more that can be done to reduce this figure and put work and opportunity at the heart of the reform of the system that we are bringing forward.
Jenrick.
Unemployment is soaring. There's nearly 1 million young people not in education or training. It is a terrible waste of human potential and an economic catastrophe. Reform is proposing that we scrap the damaging jobs tax and pay for that within a new levy on migrant labour. It would make it much, much easier to employ British workers. Yeah. Would the Secretary of State consider this and put British workers first? Yeah.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if he's just noticed that there are 1 million young people not in education, employment or training, one has to ask, what was he doing when he was a minister in the last government when these figures went up by 250,000 and he said nothing at all about it? We have brought forward a youth guarantee that will put work and opportunity at the heart of the reform of the system. That is in stark contrast to his record of complete inaction on this when he was in a position to do something about it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Baroness Morris's inquiry into white working class children has identified how from early years to future jobs, white British boys on free school meals are falling well behind. I'd like to ask how ministers, with all the reviews going on and all the work underway, will review and incorporate this inquiry's findings into their work, particularly in relation to jobs and skills.
Well, I welcome my honourable friend's question. I think this is a really important report today, showing the lack of opportunity for white working class children at schools and our agenda of maximum opportunity for young people, of not letting people drop out and be left behind, is really important in getting more opportunity to this group of young people.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Local businesses in Bognor Regis and Littlehampton tell me they're not recruiting due to the additional costs and uncertainty created by the Employment Rights Act. Has the Secretary of State assessed the impact of government policy, because employment rights count for little if people cannot get a job in the first place?
Well, I would encourage the local businesses in her constituency to look at the new incentives available from tomorrow, where they can access a hiring incentive of £3,000 to help them with the cost of taking on a young person, provided that young person has been out of work for 6 months or more. We want to do this in partnership with business. It's an important policy, and I look forward to her being a champion of it in her local constituency.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I attended the Warwickshire Employer and Stakeholder Conference, and we heard from students, alumni and businesses who are providing time to those young people so that they can gain the skills that they need, and it was very inspiring and moving. But does my right honourable friend agree with me that more needs to be done to encourage businesses to provide even more hours? And the College have said that this is a real challenge.
I do agree with them that we need to work with businesses. I want this to be seen as a national cause, a national endeavour, and a good partnership between business and government, because I think it's in the whole country's interest to make maximum use of the very best resource that we have, Mr. Speaker, which is the talents of the British people themselves.
Speaker, sadly, Leicester South is not immune from the unemployment figures for young people, 1,000 young people and counting.
My concern is around AI is about to make this even go worse, especially as CEOs are citing lower human capital value as justification for replacing workers with AIs. So can I ask the Minister what his department is doing to ensure technological advancements create opportunity rather than unemployment?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has raised a very important question. I think young people themselves are very alive to this. This is an all-purpose technology. It will both destroy and create jobs. And the leadership task is to make sure that this country is best placed to use that technology, to be a good home for investment in it, and to make sure that it adds to the skills of our people.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 17th of July, we're hosting the Journey to Work Expo in Stafford, bringing together successful major employers, local businesses, with a focused aim of getting young people into work. Last year, we had more than 300 people attend. So can the Minister tell me how the Youth Guarantee will reach young people in towns like Stafford, and what is being done what support is available to communities already doing this kind of work?
Well, let me congratulate my honourable friend for being an absolutely fantastic champion for Stafford and for her constituents. The Youth Guarantee will help young people in her constituency through the hiring incentives, through the apprenticeship changes, through more work experience placements, and I know that she will work with me and with the rest of the government to be a real champion for opportunity for young people in Stafford.
Mr. Logan.
Mr. Speaker, given that benefit fraud is estimated at around £9 billion, and given that the WASPy women are apparently willing to have the cost of their just compensation claim capped at around a third of that figure, can someone from the ministerial team confirm that the government are willing to change course and negotiate with the WASPy women?
Minister.
Well, the honourable member will know that there is a judicial review claim that has been filed, and we can't comment on live litigation. But what I will say is that there are legitimate views about rises in the state pension age, particularly the 2011 acceleration put in place by the coalition government. But the investigation that is being considered by the PSHO is not about those increases. It's purely about the narrower point about the communication, and the government has made its position clear on that and set it out in the decision document placed in the House of Commons library.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Safeguarding has been a key focus of the Work and Pensions Select Committee, so I was shocked to hear my constituent Barbara Sked receive a letter to her executors incorrectly notifying them of her death. This resulted in Barbara's benefits being stopped, including PIP and all her pensions. My team have been working hard to get those reinstated. Can the Secretary of State outline the steps he is taking to ensure these kinds of errors are minimised and the appropriate package of support is put in place so when errors do occur, they're dealt with quickly?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend for raising this. It is an incredibly important case to highlight, and I appreciate this will have been a deeply distressing experience for her constituent, and I apologise for that. I can confirm that all payments, thanks in part to her ministrations, have now been fully restored and that any arrears owed have been issued. But given the seriousness of this investigation, the case remains under active consideration, not only so that we can look into the circumstances that allowed this to arise, but that we can ensure nothing like this happens again.
Let the front bench change over. We now come to the urgent question, Dr. Kieran Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Justice if he will make a statement on the early release of rapists and child groomers.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Those who perpetrate these heinous crimes must face the full force of the law. Under this government, convictions for child sex offences are a record high. At the end of Parliament, more criminals will be behind bars than ever before. But this government, Mr. Speaker, inherited a prison system on the brink of collapse, with at one point fewer than 100 places left in the whole estate. Without the Sentencing Act, which received royal assent in January of this year, the courts would be at risk of grinding to a halt, preventing sex offenders and others from being brought to justice. No space in prisons would mean no trials, no justice for victims, no punishment for offenders. That is the choice. strict licence conditions in the community for those who've already served time in prison under our reforms, or the collapse of the system entirely, leaving sex offenders and others acting with impunity. The previous government added just 500 prison places to the system in 14 years, in stark contrast to this government, which is delivering the largest prison expansion since the Victorian era. In under 2 years, this government has delivered 3,100 additional places, and we are on track to deliver almost 11,000 more by 2031. Under our reforms, dangerous offenders will continue to be locked up for a long time. Over 18,000 offenders serving life or extended sentences will not be affected by changes to release points and will remain subject to parole board decisions. Offenders who are released will face strict licence conditions, closer probation supervision for the most dangerous offenders, exclusion zones, tagging, 24/7 tracking and curfews. This is the biggest expansion, Mr. Speaker, of tagging in history, ensuring dangerous offenders are monitored and the public protected. And if risk in the community becomes unmanageable, those offenders can be recalled to prison. Mr. Speaker, the previous government left prisons on the verge of collapse. This government is safely delivering reforms needed to end the cycle of capacity crises and protect the British public.
Dr. Keir Starmer.
Imagine you are the victim of a serious crime, as serious as rape or child grooming, and you receive a letter telling you that the perpetrator who harmed you is going to be let out of prison early. Appallingly, this is the experience right now for thousands of victims of crime, including some of the most serious crimes imaginable, thanks to the changes that have been made to our sentencing laws by this Labour government, helped by the Liberal Democrats. Before the Minister and Labour MPs, as he did, tells us as a result of prison overcrowding, I want every member of this House to be crystal clear about the actual choice this government is making. The last Labour government released 80,000 prisoners early. The last Conservative government also operated early release programmes, as this government has. That's not new, but these schemes excluded serious sexual offenders. Do Labour MPs really want to tell their constituents they support the early release of rapists and child groomers when there are other existing schemes that could be used to avoid that? I want to pay tribute to grooming gangs campaigner Fiona Goddard, who, like many others, refused to be silent when she received her letter. Fiona's abusers were sentenced to between 16 and 20 years in prison in 2019. Now she says the justice she got in that courtroom is being snatched away from her, and she's right. What did the Labour government say to the journalist raising her case? That the most serious offences would be excluded. Labour told a victim of rape, sexual assault and grooming that her offenders weren't serious enough to be excluded from early release. Disgraceful. And here we are, just a matter of weeks away from these serious offenders coming out, and we still don't know how many are being released and what crimes they've committed. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent question. This government cannot cover up what it's doing to victims any longer. They must tell us now, today, how many criminals, how many rapists and child groomers are going to be released early, when they're going to be released, and exactly what crimes they've committed. I'm confident when the public understand what is being done in their names, there'll be an outcry. And our new incoming Prime Minister will have a choice: to act in the interest of rapists and paedophiles, or to stand up for victims. What's it going to be?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've listened to the Honourable Member on this issue a lot, and I must once again remind him of his record in government and why the Sentencing Act was an absolute necessity to keep the criminal justice system functioning. Prisons, when we came to office, were at bursting point. 500 prison places added in 14 years. 10,000 offenders released by the last government, largely in secret. And that's the key point, Mr. Speaker, because he's asked quite rightly and understandably questions about how the scheme is going to be delivered, how victims are going to be kept informed. Under the Conservatives, it was pure chaos. They lost the grip of the system. They didn't have a long-term plan for stability in the prison estate. And that meant when they did have to operate early release mechanisms, they gave the victims just a few days' notice, if that at all. Complete secrecy, complete chaos, and we will not let that happen to the British public again. There is a choice. There is no alternative that has been offered by the opposition to the prison crisis that they created. There is a choice. Strict...
Can I just help? But we don't need to worry about what their position is. The question is to yourself and about what you're going to do. As I've also got a constituent that got a letter. So I've got to say it's very serious across the country. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. The Sentencing Act, which received royal assent in January, sets out some provisions which are coming into effect in September. We are determined to ensure that victims will receive due notification in good time, not just because we believe there is a responsibility of government to let them know, but because we know that victims need to have a role to play in the licence conditions that we set. It's absolutely vital that victims' voices are heard. That's why we've already begun communication with victims groups and indeed victims who are party to the victim contact scheme. And we will go further and make sure that all those that are party to the scheme receive precise information on their case. Not just because we want to let them know, Mr. Speaker, but because we want to hear from them to ensure that when we put in the most robust licence conditions in the community, victims' voices are at the heart of the decisions we make. That's absolutely right, and that's not what happened under the Conservative government.
Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recognise actually that so few rapists went to prison under the previous administration and the increase has been huge actually, especially with child rapists, and I congratulate the government from that. It is my opinion, however, that there should be more exemptions within the release scheme, and child rapists seems to be an area that we should potentially all be looking to work together for, if the numbers allow, because we cannot let the prison system end. What I would like to ask, though, is that really specifically the risk assessments that will be done on these cases before release, because I have to say my experience of risk assessment in these cases is not great, does not take account of the victim, does not take account of public safety more broadly. So can we have some assurances that there has been a change to the regime from the previous administration of risk assessments that will be done on release of any prisoner to make sure that we are actually safe in public?
Well, let me first, Mr. Speaker, if I may, pay tribute to my honourable friend for the work she did both in government and indeed in opposition on these issues. She's absolutely right, as she's raised with me outside of the chamber, the issue of pre-sentencing reports, in particular in relation to domestic abuse. And as she knows, I've spoken with Lord Timpson, and we will be coming back to her on those specific measures. She is also right to raise this issue of community safety, and that is why we've invested £700 million into the probation system, the biggest investment in probation for a generation. It's why we've recruited more probation officers than ever before, and it's why, for the first time, in several decades, in fact, that caseloads for your average probation officer is going down rather than going record highs under the Conservatives.
Jess Brown for the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first pay tribute to the victims and survivors of some of the most appalling, heinous crimes for their bravery, speaking out about the fear that they have felt, receiving letters from the MOJ informing them that their perpetrators might be let out early. Now, I understand that the purpose of these letters is to ensure that victims have the opportunity to engage with licence conditions, but what other support will be available to those victims that understandably feel re-traumatised and let down by the justice system? In the other place, the Prisons Minister made a commitment to those released early would be subject to intensive supervision, supported by a significant programme of electronic tagging. The Liberal Democrats were clear that the government could only bring forward these measures if the probation service was adequately resourced to achieve this in the community. The Prisons Minister agreed to an annual review into the state of probation and its ability to cope with the changes. When can we expect that first review? And finally, the government inherited a prison system that was running so hot they were at risk of losing the ability to lock up any offender. But can the Minister guarantee here today that no victim will ever again only be given just 2 days' notice, or in some cases no notice, of their perpetrator being released like they suffered in recent years?
I thank her for her question. Dealing with the 3 points, in terms of victims, we are determined to ensure that victims' voices are heard. As I said in my original response to the opposition, we've invested £15 million into victim support services. Victim liaison officers will clearly be involved in many of those cases, and the Victims Minister sits beside me and has heard her very important point. On probation, she's absolutely right that that public safety can only be ensured by investing in probation, and that's why we've done the biggest investment in a generation, £700 million. And as I've said, that investment is now beginning to bear results, with caseloads coming down significantly for the first time in a long time. In terms of, she's absolutely right that we need to give due notice to victims to make sure they're informed of what is happening to those to their perpetrators, and make sure they're involved in the process. As I said already, under the last government, that didn't happen. This will happen. I will just gently say that, of course, some victims have opted out of the contact service. We cannot say today, Mr. Speaker, all victims will, but all those that are involved with the contact service will receive it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all accept that the prison capacity crisis does require difficult decisions. But when Parliament passed the sentencing bill, ministers assured the House that the most serious and heinous offenders and those who commit the gravest crimes will continue to face the toughest sentences. Does the minister not accept that most people would regard members of grooming gangs who sexually abused, raped and exploited children, and indeed child sex offenders more generally, as falling within the ordinary meaning of the most serious and heinous offences? Now, if so, why are these not excluded from this release scheme? And can I say, as a local Member of Parliament, I am absolutely disgusted that Shabir Ahmed, the leader of the Rochdale grooming gang, who was an Oldham resident, is due to be released according to local news reports, not because the government has informed local MPs, this week. Now, of course, he was convicted of crimes in relation to Rochdale victims, but we all know that for every victim who went through the court process, there will be other victims who did not. And the idea that Oldham is somehow not affected by the evil of this person is ridiculous. So can I urge the Minister, please look at this case in particular, but also the rules that are allowing this to be normalised when it cannot be allowed to be normalised.
Well, let me thank him for his question, and I'll of course not just look into that particular case, but also meet with him urgently to discuss that case. I would gently say that the provisions in the Sentencing Act that was passed in January have not come into effect yet. They begin in September. So I don't know the details of that case. I will look into them urgently. I will meet with him. But on the face of it anyway, that case falls outside of the new legislation that we've passed. But I will certainly meet with him and make sure we do that urgently.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the news that Keighley and Bradford will finally be getting an independent grooming gangs inquiry. This has been a long fight. But for survivors like Fiona Goddard, who I spoke with again last night, that news has been bittersweet, because the very fact that Fiona and many other victims and survivors of the most horrific sexual violence have been written to by this government to inform them that the very rapists and paedophiles convicted of abusing them could be released as early as September is an absolute disgrace. Mr. Speaker, Fiona's life has been turned upside down, and she and many others right now live in fear and of fear of being re-traumatised once again by a system which is literally diminishing the horrors that happened to them. So I ask the Minister directly, will he guarantee right now from the dispatch box that Fiona's perpetrators will not be released early?
Well, let me thank the honourable member for not just his question, but indeed his work on this issue, done in good faith for a number of years. I will gently say to him, as I've said before, that the Sentencing Act which was passed, which is difficult, no doubt, is only on the statute book because of the failure of the Conservative government over 14 years to build appropriate prison places. And on the issue of grooming gangs, before coming to this place, I spent a large part of the previous decade working with victims of grooming gangs. I take it incredibly serious. And I know the honourable member does as well. And I respect him for the work he's done on this issue. But in 2022, the report by Professor Jay offered a series of recommendations on this very important issue for his community, my community, and across the country. And he knows, because he sits on the Home Affairs Select Committee, he knows when she gave evidence to that committee in the beginning of 2025 that she was ignored month after month after month by successive Conservative Home Secretaries. So we will not be taking lessons on this issue from the Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for coming to the dispatch box and taking answering questions on a particularly important issue. I have to join with my humble friend from Birmingham Yardie to say I'm not only concerned about rapists being released early, I'm also concerned about the low conviction rate when it comes to rape cases. I hope he can touch upon what the government are doing to deal with that issue. But can I ask him specifically what he can do to ensure me that if any prisoners are released early for whatever crime they've committed, that they are being effectively monitored so that residents in my constituent of Harlow feel safe, particularly considering the mess and the two-tier probation service that we got left with by the party opposite. And can I also more specifically ask him a little bit about tagging? We've all heard stories about people that go out on tag and the tags not being fit for purpose, then being able to take them off. So what can we do to ensure that if people are released on tag, those tags can't be taken off?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. As I said before, under this government, convictions for child sexual offences are a record high. There's more work to be done in that area, and I know that my honourable friend, the Victims Minister, and indeed others, are working to ensure that we have even more robust investigation and punishment of those who commit these serious offences. As we set out in the Sentencing Act, we've also implemented the most robust community package than ever before. So that includes exclusion zones, tagging, 24/7 tracking, curfews, the biggest expansion of tagging in history to ensure dangerous offenders are monitored and the public protected. We've got to make sure that tagging system is robust, and we will do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In June, 20 grooming gang perpetrators were jailed for offences in West Yorkshire, which included the rape and abuse of 3 girls. The youngest was aged just 12. Abbas Khaji was sentenced to just 7 years for rape, Mohammed Ishtiaq Hussain just 8. All too soon, these vile men will be back on the streets of the very communities that they terrorised. The idea that the government could cut their sentences to be even shorter is terrifying. Can the Minister please assure this House this is not about the past, this is about the present and the future, that everybody involved in grooming and rape gang offences will at the very least serve the entirety of their already too short sentences?
Well, once again, I'm very happy to meet with her or indeed the appropriate Member of Parliament to look in the details of that case. We need to make sure that we have enough prison places to ensure that those that commit these serious offences serve time at all. And that is what the Sentencing Act, complemented with the biggest prison building programme since the Victorian era, will do.
Taylor. Mr. Speaker, I was contacted by a constituent who had received one of these letters earlier this week, and the offender in question was a vile monster responsible for decades of sexual abuse. He was sentenced to 30 years for 31 counts of sexual assault, rape and processing indecent images, and he has served less than 5 years. Can the Minister explain how this is not the most heinous crimes and how an offender like this is still eligible for this scheme? And can he also reassure residents that they will be written to as soon as possible to set their minds at rest if their offenders or if their abusers are indeed going to be part of this scheme?
Well, I'm very happy to meet with him and indeed his constituent, if helpful, to discuss those cases. As I've set out before, 18,000 offenders serving life or extended sentences will not be affected by the changes at all, but I'm very happy to look into the particulars of that case.
Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Minister has heard quite clearly from members on both sides of the House that there's a real concern that what was said at the dispatch box about the most serious and heinous crimes and those who had committed them not actually being released on this. This is where the biggest dispute is in relation to this. Could the Minister just please pledge to the House that he'll go back to the Department and review this, and all of those who will look as if they're getting that early release, who've committed rape, who have been convicted of child grooming, and make sure that they are excluded from this scheme?
Mr. Speaker, we will always do what we need to do to make sure we have a functioning criminal justice system and a prison system that can keep the public safe, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Richard Tice. Mr. Speaker, the British people will be absolutely disgusted and revolted that these child grooming gang perpetrators and rapists may be released early. Reform's position is clear. They should receive mandatory whole-of-life sentences. If the excuse from this government is there's a shortage of places, then why doesn't it get on and deport the 10,000 foreign nationals clogging up our jails?
Well, Mr. Speaker, deportation of foreign national offenders is at record highs under this government, and will continue to work to make sure that we deport those foreign national offenders who shouldn't be here. I think the Justice spokesperson for Reform is the Right Honourable Member for Runcorn, and recently she said that 1.2 million people should be put in prison every year. There is no plan, no serious plan for reform that keeps our country safe.
Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the government announced the first areas to be investigated as part of the rape gang inquiry. And yet, under this government's new Sentencing Act, rapists and child groomers will be released early from prison. The Minister must see that putting these criminals on the streets not only makes an absolute mockery of Labour's rape gang inquiry, but goes to prove Labour were never serious about giving one or locking up those perpetrators.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said, there was an inquiry into these issues that was began by the last Conservative government. The chair of that inquiry, Professor Alexis Jay, said that their response was, quote, inconsequential, insubstantial, committed to nothing. Victims waited years for action and got nothing. There were briefings. It was, quote, hysterical and half-baked, highly emotional. The former Prime Minister Boris Johnson said money spent on child sex abuse inquiries as being, quote, spaffed up the wall. I will not take any lessons from her or the Conservative Party on this issue.
Richard Tongue of Penny-sur-Wine, Carnarvon, is presently in prison after being found guilty of historic rape and sexual offences against a child in Nottingham. He was reported to Nottinghamshire Police in 2022. Even so, his first police interview wasn't until June 2023. Concerns have been raised with me that Tongue remained at liberty and free to work in a restaurant in my constituency until he was sentenced to 12 years in prison on April 17th this year. That's 4 years. Could the Minister advise me how to find out why Tongue wasn't remanded to custody prior to the court case, and what child protection and public safety measures should be put in place between Nottinghamshire Police and North Wales Police, given that this is a cross-border police force issue?
As the honourable member knows, questions as to whether a defendant should be remanded are a matter for the judiciary. On the particulars of this cross-border issue and local protective agencies working together to keep the public safe, I'm very happy to look into that and we'll get back to her.
One of the reasons that the present Prime Minister has lost the trust of the public is his refusal, time and again, to give straight answers to straight questions. My front bench colleague has asked a straight question, which is how many rapists and how many child abusers are scheduled for early release. Either the Minister isn't answering because he doesn't know the answers, in which case he should tell us that, or he does know the answers but is refusing to give them. Which is it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, when the Sentencing Act went through Parliament and we had a number of debates, there was an impact assessment which was published, and the numbers are contained within there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, any victim of rape or child sexual abuse will know that securing a conviction is almost impossible. I am absolutely astonished that those incarcerated for raping children are not excluded from this early release scheme. But given that the government is including them, my question is that given the absolute mess made of the probation service by the reforms under the previous Conservative government, will the Minister guarantee here from the dispatch box today that the probation service now is adequately staffed, funded and equipped to closely monitor any of these awful perpetrators who are let out of prison way too early?
Mr. Speaker, yes, Lord Timpson, the Minister responsible for the probation service in the other place, has undertaken huge reforms to how the probation service operate, backed up by investments, and I'm confident that we have a robust probation system ready for the challenge ahead.
Dr. Caroline-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, during the passage of the sentencing bill, we were told that the perpetrators of the most serious, heinous crimes would not be included in these measures. So can the Minister explain why the government does not think the rape of children is one of the most serious and heinous crimes, and how many of such individuals will be coming out early?
Mr. Speaker, as I've already said, over 18,000 offenders serving life and extended sentences, including rapists, including those that have committed the most heinous offences, are not affected by the Sentencing Act provisions at all. But, Mr. Speaker, I need to be abundantly clear that we will never let happen what we inherited under the Conservative government, where there were no prison places. We were running out of prison places, which meant that the whole criminal justice system was on the verge of collapse. Never again.
Adam Dance.
My constituent was recently told that the person who was found guilty of grooming his child on social media could possibly be released as part of early release scheme. Does the Minister recognise the distress this sort of news causes victim? And can the Minister tell the Yeovil constituency what progress the government has made on increasing prison places and strengthening the probation service in the South West? Victims don't just want to feel heard, they want to feel safe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he's absolutely right to raise the concern amongst constituents who have received this letter. But the purpose of the letter, the purpose of this engagement is to ensure we work with victims to make sure that they're informed of the situation, but also that their voice is heard. That didn't happen under the last government, who had to rush out communication because they'd lost control of the system completely.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. I would expect the Minister to know the numbers, and a number of times this has been asked, so I'm going to give the Minister another attempt at this. How many rapists and sexual offenders will be released early under this Sentencing Act?
Mr. Speaker, in the impact assessment during the Sentencing Act going through Parliament, it set out very clearly that 7,500 prison places will be saved as a result of the Sentencing Act.
On the message.
Speaker. The Minister talks a very good game about prison numbers, but he'll know very well from the amount of exchanges that we've had about prison places that there are a lot of prison places that this government has yet to deliver. ISG went bust in 2024, September 2024, as a prison contractor, and because the government sat idle for 18 months without appointing new contractors, 3,500 prison places weren't delivered, which would mean that they didn't need to release prisoners early now. Yep. But from my perspective, in my constituency, I have a male sex offenders prison. Can he write to me, because I appreciate he won't have the numbers to hand, but can he write to me and let me know how many rapists and child sexual abusers are going to be released from that prison?
Mr. Speaker, I seem to spend half my life writing to the honourable member who asks a lot of questions on this issue. Let's just be very clear about the facts here. 14 years, only 500 places were built under the Conservative government. In 2 years, we've built 3,500 net places and we'll have 14,000 by 2031. And the honourable member makes the point, well, some of these were apparently planned for or envisaged by the last Conservative government. Unless I'm hallucinating, I'm the one that's opening these prisons under a Labour government.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Soft touch fever is spreading across the land because in Scotland the SNP Scottish Executive is about to start releasing rapists as much as 2.5 years early. Does the front bench not realise that they're so out of touch with the public on this issue that they risk the very fundamentals of the justice system?
Well, he's right that faith in the justice system is absolutely crucial, and that's why the situation we inherited, which would mean that the criminal justice system was teetering on the brink of collapse, where we would not have been able to have trials, where arrests would have been made impossible, is completely unacceptable, and we'll never let that happen again.
Jim Allister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Surely the Minister must agree that sustaining and instilling confidence in victims is essential to securing and sustaining prosecutions.
Quite right.
And therefore, any indication that there could be early release of such a person is bound to undermine a victim's confidence. Last week in Northern Ireland, we saw, through the bravery of 2 young women, Jeffrey Donaldson convicted as a child rapist, a man who passed himself off in this House and elsewhere as a statesman, demonstrating that no one, thankfully, is above the law. But if we get into the business of early release for child rapists, how do we ever hope to sustain victims coming forward?
Mr. Speaker, let me put on record also my gratitude to the bravery of those victims that he's identified for what they undertook to ensure there was justice. What undermines confidence in the criminal justice system is a system that completely unravels. And without the appropriate prison places, without getting down the Crown Court backlog, which my honourable friend, the Courts Minister, is busy doing, we undermine faith in the system completely. We cannot let that happen. That must mean difficult decisions, but we won't shy away from those.
Jim Sherman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his answers to the questions. My constituents are horrified by early release of rapists and child groomers. And if a criminal is sentenced to 15 years for destroying a child's life or committing an horrific rape, they should serve every single day, indeed every single hour of that sentence behind bars. Opening the prison gates early does not fix the justice system. It actively endangers women and children across the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And will the Minister urgently review these catastrophic legal changes and guarantee that no convicted rapist or child groomer will be given a get out of jail card by this Minister's department and this government, please? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, we will not shy away from the difficult decisions needed to save the criminal justice system, to ensure that we have prison places to put criminals behind bars. And Mr. Speaker, if I may, just briefly, by the end of this Parliament, more criminals will be behind bars than ever before. This is not a matter of being soft on crime, it's a matter of making sure that we can put criminals away in future.
Point of order, Dr Kieran Mullen.
I genuinely seek your guidance and support, Mr Speaker. I've submitted multiple written questions, FOI requests. We've had a name day question on this matter that was due to be answered on Friday, which the government has refused to answer as it should. The Minister said that the information we're after is in the impact assessment. That is not true. There is not the information on the number of offenders in terms of rapists and child groomers being answered. How do we in the public get answers to these very basic, incredibly important questions?
Look, what I would suggest is, I'm sure the bench has heard there's outstanding question that should have been answered. I'm quite disappointed if it is the case. It should be answered. Members of Parliament put questions down to ministers, and ministers are answerable to this House. Not when they feel like answering it or when they get round to it. That is totally unacceptable. I hope that they will go back and check the records to make sure letters have been returned, answered, and also questions. But name day questions mean it's in the title, should be answered on a name day. So look, what I would say is, it's been heard, I'm sure that can be rectified today, and I'm sure if it's not, the answer is there are many avenues, including coming back to this House, because I do believe there are questions to be answered. All MPs should be told, not who, but how many may be released within their constituencies. I just say to the Minister, it's bad for all MPs, and MPs, quite rightly, need to represent their constituents. The sooner we help them, the sooner that this House will be in a better place. I will leave it at that for now. Yeah, no, I'm waiting for the front bench change over. Thank you. We now come to the statement. Minister Norris.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and with your permission I will make a statement on asylum accommodation. It is important to remind the House of the wider context, and in particular the events that have brought us here today. In the years before the general election, the number of people arriving in the United Kingdom illegally, particularly via the small boat method, across the Channel rocketed. The dismal consequences of this abject failure to secure our country's borders are grimly familiar to us all. Individuals risking their lives to come here via dangerous means, criminal gangs growing rich from the proceeds of organising these journeys, community cohesion placed under severe strain, and the public's trust in the state's ability to perform one of its most basic functions shredded. And over the last 2 years, this government has taken concerted action to turn this situation around. We've begun by implementing major asylum reforms to reduce the incentives that draw people to this country. We've cut the overall asylum cost by nearly £1 billion, and whilst asylum decision-making, which effectively ground to a halt under the previous government, is at a 24-year high. More foreign criminals and illegal migrants are being removed than at any time in many, many years, and in partnership with our French counterparts, we've stopped more than 44,000 crossing attempts. And we've also put in place a groundbreaking scheme that means that small boat arrivals can, for the first time, be returned to France. And all of this work is important and is making a difference, Mr Speaker, but perhaps the most totemic and tangible manifestation of the failing system we inherited is the continued use of hotels to house asylum seekers. The issue has, quite understandably, been a source of widespread concern and anger. As a government, we recognise those frustrations and we share them. Hotels ought to be local assets, serving their communities, not propping up the asylum accommodation system. When they are used for this purpose, there are significant implications for local services, for community cohesion and for public safety. Clearly, this unsuitable, unsustainable and costly practice must be stopped. And that's why this government made a commitment to end the use of asylum hotels in this Parliament. We are well on track to deliver on that aim, Mr Speaker. In April, we announced that 11 asylum hotels have been closed and given back to local communities. We were clear at that point that more would follow in subsequent weeks, and so that has proven, with a further 20 now having closed. That means that there are just under 170 asylum hotels in use, a reduction of more than half compared to the peak of around 400 under the previous government. And the number accommodated in those hotels has also seen a significant fall, from 56,000 in 2023 to around 21,000 now. So progress is being made, Mr Speaker, but we must go further. And that means scaling up our use of larger, more basic facilities. There are currently 2 such sites in operation, at Wethersfield in Essex and at Crowborough in East Sussex. These sites began housing asylum seekers in 2023 and January this year, respectively. Across both sites, there is at present capacity to accommodate up to 1,340 individuals, with additional contingency capacity at Wethersfield of 400. And in the meantime, workers continue to identify further viable locations. And I can today confirm to the House that 3 new ex-military sites are now under consideration: MOD Barnham in Suffolk, MOD Bicester in Oxfordshire, and MOD Linton-on-Ouse in North Yorkshire. Together, these sites could eventually provide accommodation for around 3,750 asylum seekers, subject to feasibility assessments, to planning permission and the necessary approvals. And those caveats are important, Mr Speaker, because whilst our commitment to the promise we have made on hotels is absolute, we have to make sure that we get this right and carry out all the relevant due diligence so that if we do decide to proceed with an alternative site, our plans are as strong as they possibly can be. So let me assure members that we have learned from the previous government's forays into this arena, and no final decision will be taken on any site until in each case all necessary arrangements, assessments and approvals are in place and have been properly considered. And in relation to the 3 potential sites I've mentioned, that work is ongoing in conjunction with local and national partners. And to further support the exit from hotels, I can also confirm to the House that we're exploring similarly the possibility of extending the use of the site at Crowborough, which under the current arrangement is due to end next January. And at Wethersfield, we're again exploring both an extension and the best use of capacity there. And finally, following detailed assessments, the Government has decided not to proceed with Cameron Barracks in Scotland as a potential site for asylum accommodation, and it will be returned to the Ministry of Defence. Before I finish, Mr Speaker, I want to assure the House that we understand our responsibilities in this space. With any decision on asylum accommodation, public safety is and will continue to be a critical consideration, and we will always take every possible step to minimise the impact on communities. And to be clear, wherever they are located, any asylum seeker should be in no doubt that if they break our laws, they will be caught, they will face justice, and like thousands of foreign offenders already removed under this government, made to leave our country. To conclude, Mr Speaker, it was always going to take time to fix the mess we inherited. But as the measures I've set out today clearly demonstrate, we are acting decisively to achieve the change the country voted for at the general election, by closing asylum hotels for good, by securing our borders, and by restoring order and control to the immigration system. That's what the public rightly expect, and that is what the government is working relentlessly to deliver. I commend this statement to the House.
Kitty Lamb, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement, which confirms what we have suspected since last week, that this government is planning to put more illegal migrants into sites across the country. Some of these are due to host illegal migrants until 2030. Yet the government didn't think that it was worth alerting the honourable members who represent these communities and those nearby ahead of the announcement in the press. Rather than subjecting these plans to proper scrutiny here in Parliament, the government tried to sneak this news out quietly before the weekend, without discussion here in this place by those people's democratically elected representatives. This is exactly the same playbook that the government has tried to use in places like Inverness, where, thanks to the work of the Conservative group on Highland Council, the Home Office's plans to house illegal migrants at Cameron Barracks were blocked. We have seen, in far too many cases, the risk that illegal migrants, most of them young men, pose to the public, and particularly to women and children. If the government is planning to force communities to live alongside people who've shown complete contempt for our laws and norms by the very act of coming here illegally, the least that they can do is allow those plans to be subject to proper scrutiny. And now that we finally do have an opportunity to scrutinise them, we can perhaps see why the government was so keen to hide them. Because they reveal that, for all the talk of smashing the gangs, this government doesn't have any faith in its own ability to fix this problem. Why, if they're so sure that they are ending illegal channel crossings, is the government making plans to host illegal migrants in this country until 2030? What does that tell us about their confidence in their own approach? The truth is that this government has no intention of fixing this problem. They care only about managing people's perceptions of it. So while they talk up the reduction in illegal migrants living in hotels, they conveniently leave out the fact that thousands more migrants are being housed in so-called dispersal accommodation, homes in the middle of our towns and cities where illegal migrants pose an even greater risk to the public. Since the last election, 75,000 people have crossed the Channel. In the past few weeks alone, 3,000 have made the crossing, and for all the government's talk of removals, nearly all of them, 93%, are being allowed to stay. The honourable gentleman boasts about a reduction in outstanding decisions, but they've achieved that reduction by granting asylum to thousands upon thousands of illegal migrants. The Minister said just now, and I quote, "To stop the use of asylum hotels, we must go further." And that means scaling up our use of larger, more basic facilities. He is right that the government must go further to stop the use of asylum hotels for good. But he is utterly wrong that this problem is solved by instead spending huge resources creating other places for those who arrive here illegally to live. As members on this side of the House have made clear time and again, the only real solution to the crisis at our border is to remove illegal migrants as soon as they arrive. People must know that if they try to break our laws, they cannot stay. And for it to be possible to remove people as soon as they arrive, we must leave the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights, which prevents us from doing so. But the government refuses to recognise this. They're in hock to activist lawyers in this country and unaccountable judges in Strasbourg, and keeping those people happy takes precedence over keeping the British people safe and delivering on their democratic will. The plans before us are another sorry example of that. More illegal migrants will enter the endless cycle of appeals and legal challenges, allowing them to stay here for years at the taxpayers' expense. More people will be put at risk because of these plans and because of the government's unwillingness truly to solve this problem for good.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think we see the contrast very clearly there. We have here from the government a serious plan of how to accommodate a significant number of people and indeed to change that reality. And the Honourable Lady offers instead just Hail Marys and long shots, none of which, of course, her colleagues had 14 years to do, who sat through it and didn't make any of those decisions. It's hard to believe. So she started by asking why. And this why point is very important. The reality is these sites are part of our theory of change. Because we know at the moment that traffickers say, come to the UK, live in a hotel, you'll be able to work illegally dead easily. You have to change that reality if you want to reduce pull factors. This is changing that reality. It's saying, actually, no, you won't live in a hotel. Actually, you may well live on a military site. That's about reducing numbers, reducing the impact on the British taxpayer. That's the right thing to do. She mentioned dispersed accommodation. Now, in the previous statistics release in May, there's a 32% reduction of people in hotels. There's less than a 1% reduction in number of people in dispersed accommodation. So the reality is not quite as she put there. She talks too about decision-making. Well, she knows the grant rate hasn't changed significantly at all. The idea that we're making more decisions by letting more people through, that's simply, I can't accept that to be the case. The reality is we have a choice here between yet another hopeful culture war attempt by an opposition that has no ideas, or a serious plan to reduce numbers, because let's face it, applications for asylum are up 3 times what they would have been 10 years ago. This is serious action. That's empty calories.
Kerry Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is deeply concerning news for my South West Norfolk constituency, where the boundary fence of RAF Barnham adjoins the market town of Thetford, which I represent, the town centre of which are just a short walk away from the base itself. Now, I strongly support people's right to claim asylum, and I am proud that we are able to offer refuge to those fleeing war and persecution, including those who have supported our armed forces abroad. But this is not without risk and impacts upon community relations. In the absence of openness and transparency and a proper plan, malign forces will fill the void, stoking greater fear and division. Whether it is a Conservative government or this one, these announcements should be sensitively handled and thoroughly planned, and that has not happened in this case. And where there has been secrecy and confusion, and it is my community that is paying the price for this failure. While such news will never be welcomed by a community, the worst could be mitigated with a stronger commitment to transparency, engagement and reassurance. Can I therefore ask the Minister, alongside this announcement, where is the engagement plan? Where is the communication strategy? And where is the commitment to address community cohesion concerns in these areas?
Minister Norris.
Grateful to my honourable friend for those important questions. I would recognise, and I'd start where he started, that everything is local somewhere, and the impact of our proposals are significant on those local communities. And I do recognise that. That's important. What I would say in terms of impact and developing plans to mitigate impact, that's what we're doing now. There's a reason why we don't wait till the very end and seek to announce the decision just as it's taken. At some point, of course, we vet sites. We vetted all sorts of sites around the country ahead of being able to bring these ones forward. But there comes a point now that we need to get on site. You need to start peeling back the layers, as it were. We need to start engaging with the local authority, with the police, with health services. That point's now. He is right. There does need to be sensitive handling plans within that. And I appreciate that the burden is on myself and the government to demonstrate that we do so. I believe that we can do whilst mitigating the impacts on his community and surrounding ones. But as I say, I know that's up to us to demonstrate that we do.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Will Forster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I regret that the Labour government still has not set out a credible plan to restore fairness and control in our immigration and asylum system. This announcement is another sideways step that fails to address the root cause of the problem. Simply moving asylum seekers from one form of unsuitable, inexpensive and unsuitable accommodation to another is not good enough, particularly when the costs are going up. At the Crowborough MOD site, currently in operation, accommodation costs around £160 per asylum seeker per night. That is more than the average asylum hotel place. The government is choosing a more expensive option, adding an estimated £60,000 every night to the bill faced by taxpayers. How does the Minister justify that? Will the Minister confirm whether this decision is driven by a desire to be closing asylum hotels rather than securing the best value for taxpayers? Instead, the government should be focusing on reducing the asylum backlog and ending the limbo that many asylum seekers are in. The overall asylum caseload is now higher than when Labour took office, and while the appeals backlog has reached record levels, will the Minister set out what he and his department is doing to reduce that backlog and ensure that the Home Office gets more decisions right first time and avoid unnecessary appeals? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, tackling dangerous channel crossings is essential if we want to deliver the controlled and compassionate immigration and asylum system that my constituents in Woking and the whole of the British public want. Will the Minister work with our European partners to establish a genuinely effective returns agreement that ensures that we can have controlled legal routes, but those arrived by small boats can be returned swiftly?
I'm grateful for those questions. The Honourable Gentleman has heard the plan from myself, from my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, before. It's cooperation abroad, it's quicker and better decision making, it's more returns, all of which are going much better than our predecessors. It's tackling illegal working, but crucially, it's reducing pull factors too. And I sometimes feel in this place that colleagues on opposite benches have given up on the ideas that the numbers might go down. Well, actually, the numbers are significantly elevated from what we are used to, and with sensible attempts to tackle pull factors, like tackling illegal working, but like this too, we can reduce those. The Honourable Gentleman talks about cost. Well, first of all, he cites the number for Crowborough. That per night figure will, of course, fall if we stay at Crowborough for longer, because some of that is upfront capital investment, which prorated over a longer period of time means that the nightly rate comes down. But again, I'd say really gently, it's because we want less of this activity. It isn't merely saying we expect to house the same number of people, so where is the cheapest place to put them? It's about saying, well, is the best use of our estate to promote a number of goals, one of which is reducing those numbers. That's how you get costs down. And we speak, I might gently say, Madam Deputy Speaker, with a degree of credibility, given that we've already taken £1 billion out of the spend to the taxpayer in this area. It is progress. He mentions appeals. He knows very well why the backlog in appeals has grown. It's because we've had a huge backlog in initial decisions to make because the previous government stopped making them. Of course, that cohort is in the appeals system. There will be, as he will have seen in the King's speech, important reforms to appeals coming. I hope he will support us in that venture because it is important. And on his point on cooperation abroad, of course, that's crucial. We engage all the time with our European neighbours and our EU neighbours, working together on a shared problem. The fruits of that are a much enhanced deal with France. Again, that work is crucial, but will continue to grow.
As the Minister has mentioned my constituency Crowborough repeatedly, I assume he'll be meeting with me this week to clarify the position for my constituents. Dr Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So, with thanks to the Honourable Member for South West Norfolk, RAF Barnham is actually in my constituency. It's adjacent to the border of Thetford and within easy walking distance of Thetford. It was formerly a base that housed mustard gas during the First War, and in the Cold War was the home of the RAF's strategic nuclear weapons. So it has an interesting history. Now, the people of Suffolk are a kind and compassionate people and do understand the need to house those who are fleeing war and persecution. but I saw a protest at RAF Barnham this weekend, so I asked the Minister, how will the views of local people be taken into account in this respect, and what exactly is the role of the local planning authority?
Thank you. Thank my honourable friend for that. And to answer your question from the Chair, Madam Deputy Speaker, of course, I'll be very happy to meet with you, as I always am, and often summoned to do so. And I'd put on record, because you're in an inimical position of not being able to clearly state on the record just how opposed you are to Crowborough, but I'm in no doubt of that, given that you tell me basically every single day via the telephone or face-to-face or through whatever tortures you can imagine through this chamber. So I would record that. And I wonder if I may not have more of that to come yet. To my honourable friend's point, these are very important. The phase that we're in now, I appreciate local communities will want to do one of two things. My clear encouragement would be to do both of them at the same time. I understand his community, many if not most, as others, will want to oppose this and want to stop the government. That's a perfectly noble endeavour in a democracy, and they will do so. There are also questions about how this will be done best in terms of how to limit the impact, be it on health services, on the police, on local amenities. I believe we can pass that test very clearly. I hope communities will engage in that also. With regards to planning, he knows that we've previously used a number of different planning devices for different sites. We haven't made final determinations for Barnham or for the others, and we will be doing that in the due course of this work.
Sir Alex Shalbrook.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, Linton-on-Ouse, in the heart of my constituency, is a small rural community, very much isolated. And 4 years ago, this plan was rejected on technical grounds. To have 3 times the population put into the local area with no means to secure people within that site so they could roam into the village, which has no amenities, does not have a village shop, would simply overwhelm the area. Now, I wanted to be able to question the Minister on Thursday, but we couldn't do that because I've had many constituents inquire over the weekend some of these questions, and these are the questions I'd like the Minister to answer now. In the past, it was disregarded on the technical terms of Northern Power Grid have indicated that they simply cannot cope to do the electrical upgrade that would be needed to feed the supply. So does this mean that industrial generators will have to be brought in, creating noise pollution in this quiet rural village? Yorkshire Water spent millions of pounds upgrading the sewage works to make sure they met their effluent discharges into water correctly. That was based on the population. This would now face a 3-fold increase. So does that mean there have to be effluent trucks, or would we be polluting the water drains? On that note, Madam Deputy Speaker, people who closed down the Linton-on-Ouse base tells me that the drains were actually concreted in at the time. Now, the Minister has said that some of these sites have already been vetted. I find this hard to believe when these issues, I don't believe, have changed. The highway network has 7.5-tonne limited bridges, so this will have to go through limited road routes. The healthcare, the local NHS, says that it has no spare capacity. Now, perhaps what's more worrying is that I've been led on good authority that local companies have been asked to tender for the work that would be needed at this site. So I very directly asked the Minister, have local companies been contacted to tender for work? Because if they have, that sort of makes it wonder if this is a feasibility study. And on that note, what will be the planning decisions? Will it be of North Yorkshire Council or will it be overridden? Madam Deputy Speaker, to call it a plan is too grand. They don't know what they are doing. They haven't thought it through, and they haven't had the decency to consult local people about it, which tells you everything you need to know about the state of chaos they are in. Exactly. The words of the Right Honourable Gentleman for Holborn and St Pancras in 2022. This is happening under his watch. So what has changed, Minister? This is still an inappropriate site on those technical issues.
I'm grateful for that series of questions. I mean, there is a slight, I would say, I might gently say, unfairness in the Honourable Gentleman saying that he and his community want a greater say in the details, but at the same time saying that we don't have a plan for it. This is the whole point of saying, rather than having, be it providers or contractors who we are inviting to tender for services to be around on sites and us to say nothing to see here, to be honest, that we are looking seriously at this site. The final decision isn't made yet, but we are, and I think that is a better way to do it. I appreciate there may be differences of views there. The Honourable Gentleman talked about roaming. You know, I think that is in no one's interest. What we've managed to do at Wethersfield, what we do at Crowborough, is to ensure that people don't just come off site and roam. They are non-detained, as the honourable gentleman said. Nevertheless, by the provision of activities and by the provision of transport, we can ensure the lightest local impact possible, and that would be our commitment for these sites also. With regards to the electricity to sewage as well, those are important parts of this process that we're in now. We are very wary of the history. It obviously transcends into the previous government, but we are well aware of that history. We wouldn't be taking forward this site if we didn't think we had viable answers to it. But nevertheless, it's only when you get onto site and start, as I say, turning up the rocks, as it were, that you can get to a final point on viability. That's the process we're doing here. On healthcare, it's not our intention that would impact on his local services outside perhaps emergency services. What we've been able to do elsewhere is to have that ordinary healthcare provided for on site to ensure that there isn't that impact on the local community. So those are the types of models. So the honourable gentleman wonders if I give way. I'm trying to answer questions fully, Madam Deputy Speaker, again. Perhaps can't win either way.
Thank you. The Minister will know from previous correspondence that I'm asking for greater transparency about the criteria used to prioritise asylum hotel closures. I'm still not clear why the Victoria Hotel in Chadderton, which was contracted by the Home Office 5 years ago without any local consultation with local people or even me as a Member of Parliament, still remains in use. In fact, in the intervening period, the then Immigration Minister, the member for Newark, who I understand is now in the reform benches, increased its capacity from 80 to 120 places. Oldham has always played its part, often doing far more than other places. In addition to the 114 asylum seekers currently in the hotel, there are 640 in dispersed accommodation in the town. But the Minister must accept that trust taken for granted becomes trust eroded. And in the end, it's one housing market. We can't have a situation, on the other hand, where we see a push from hotels to settled accommodation, but we allow Serco in Greater Manchester to take up family housing, when in my town alone there are 500 children in temporary accommodation. We've got to see this in the round, and local authorities have got to be front and centre with the Home Office of planning that through.
I thank my honourable friend for those questions. On the point on consultation, he is right. Those 400 hotels didn't have consultation. Those 400 hotels, there was no sense of impact on local amenities, local communities. I think we should do much better than that. But that hotel will close. In terms of criteria, we work that out across a variety of different factors, be it suitability of location, be it the size, be it the nature in terms of who that can accommodate to come to a prioritisation. But let me be clear to him and to his community, all of those hotels are closing.
Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Site A at MOD Bicester sits adjacent to a village of only 370 residents. It's over 2 miles from the nearest shop. There is no pavement next to the B road by the site. It is simply not a suitable place to locate 1,250 men seeking asylum. That is why a planning inspector rejected a proposal to host half the number there in 2003. The Minister says that no final decision has been taken, but that is not how it feels in Bicester. While I appreciate he has taken the time to speak to me twice on the phone, I am still to receive any written information from the Home Office. Yet the MOD has already written to service personnel families and told them that the site will take 300 people by the end of this year, rising to over 1,200 overall. To my constituents, this feels like a decision taken in secret in Whitehall and imposed on Bicester, with local people treated as an afterthought. So in less than 72 hours, 7,156 local residents have signed my petition opposing this move. Opposition stretches across the political spectrum, across parties and the community, because this isolated site is wrong for those seeking asylum and the small villages around it, with no credible plan for local services, support or social cohesion. Madam Deputy Speaker, this morning the member for Makerfield promised to end the centralised top-down Whitehall model. So why is the government racing to do exactly that in my constituency? Will the Minister pause, commit to preparing a detailed impact assessment in partnership with the local community and come to Bicester to face residents and describe his proposal to them?
I'm grateful for that question. I would reiterate, no final decision has been taken. He makes an important challenge about the written information that goes into the public domain. It is a challenge. I found this personally about how to get information to people in the right moment, in the right sequence, in the right form. Colleagues may remember when, and Madam Deputy Speaker, you certainly would, I made a commitment when we named previous sites that I would call colleagues and they would find out from me first in the media. We've been able to do that much, but there's clearly a gap there on the written fact sheets that go into the public domain. I would say as well, my experience from Crowborough and Cameron has been that, you know, the information, and there will be information we put into the public domain. It won't change on a daily basis, and that is a source of frustration. I get that, but we will give the best that we can. We will do the impact assessments that we need to do along the way. I appreciate that the burden of proof is on us to demonstrate that we can do these schemes well and do them safely. I believe that we can do. I believe we've demonstrated that we can do with 2 sites already, and indeed Napier Barracks, which has subsequently closed. But I need to pass that with him. You know, with regards to engagement from the Home Office, we will make sure that he gets the right information in the right way to have the engagement with his constituents, and that's a commitment I'd make to yourself, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to all colleagues.
Shalami.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for outlining this statement. It is important that we do have a means to help people seeking and fleeing really difficult situations and making sure we are clamping down on illegal immigration. The Minister is aware that the widespread use of asylum hotels has caused a considerable amount of pressure on local authorities. We have a situation in the UK where we are seeing over 140,000 households in temporary accommodation, including, as the Minister knows, over 175,000 children sleeping in B&Bs. And to see and ask asylum seekers to find a secure accommodation, a job and universal credit within 28 days after they receive their statements is frankly unachievable, and that pressure goes on to local authorities who are already dealing with a massive backlog. We did a recent report on our select committee looking at the conditions in temporary accommodation. I'd be grateful to know what conversations the Minister's having with colleagues in MHCLG to ensure that when our councils are procuring temporary accommodation, they are not competing with the Home Office.
Well, to the Chair of the Select Committee for that important conversation. I agree with her on the 28 days point, which is why we've extended that time limit to 42 days to give people enough time. Plus, we've put in move-on liaison officers to support that journey. I don't want people having got the good news of their protection, their next journey to be on the street. In terms of our engagement with MHCLG, that is consistent and constant. We share the goal of reducing homelessness, for one. They clearly have a strong view, like my honourable friend said, for Oldham, about the impact we can have on local housing markets. We have those conversations day in, day out to tread as lightly as possible. It's to be very clear, the easiest thing we do could be out of hotels in 3 months if we just went and prioritised the cheapest dispersed accommodation available. I think that would be wrong, and that's what we're not doing.
Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have exactly the 2 issues affecting my constituency. As you will know, Madam Deputy Speaker, Crowborough Camp affecting the back of my constituency in Copthorne Hotel close to Gatwick. The Minister, when I kindly met with him and the Mayor of Uckfield, promised to do proper engagement with MPs. Why did I not find out about the length of stay to 2030 until today? It was a talk of our cadets, London and South East, all affected on Armed Forces Day on Saturday, and I'm very interested in the costs. And on the priority of closures, Gatwick expansion is coming. The Copthorne Hotel is one of those 170 hotels where planning permission is running out. It is needed for local uses. There are issues of community cohesion and safety, which is playing out on either side of my constituency. I ask that I join him with Madam Deputy Speaker to hear about Crowborough and Copthorne, because I'm seeing this in real time in my community. Thank you.
Well, as the Right Honourable Lady says, this is the choice ahead of us. And that's why I believe that the change to larger sites is a good one. Copthorne must close, it will. I can't offer you space in Madam Deputy Speaker's meeting, but I suspect that she would be keen to have you too, and be very much so. I will apologise to her on the point of MPs. I rang all affected MPs. I rang neighbouring affected MPs in 2 cases, but I didn't in hers, so I apologise there. But I hope that I will be able to mitigate it at a point not too far away when I ring her about Copthorne.
Stella Creasy.
Thank
you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're having this debate because of the costs to us all of trying to move from the broken system that this government inherited to a fair and effective one. And we are in this position because the previous government failed to process people and now seems to want to rely on creating fiction rather than fact about what actually works. So the Minister is absolutely right to argue that we need to tackle the root causes of trying to stop people getting into boats. And it is also right to recognise where people are fleeing persecution, and that is proven, that is the mark of a good society to help those people. It's also more cost effective. Given the legal proceedings last week that the government lost about the proposals around good character and citizenship and the likelihood of more litigation because of the fiction at the idea that somebody travelling by an irregular route is somehow less of a person, does he recognise that we will save money by changing this policy and putting integration, not ill will, at the heart of that future system for refugees?
I'm grateful for those questions. I mean, again, it is important to recognise the cost of that loss of grip means that traditionally the supported population, the previous asylum contract was let on the assumption that it would be around 60,000. The previous government let it balloon to double that. It is coming down, it continues to come down, but it is still around the 100,000 mark. That is where then we have to make difficult decisions, and that's the nature of the accommodation today. You know, we do have to pivot the model in this country. We were clear in November in our asylum policy statement that we have to make sure that we reduce pull factors. We have to make sure that we remove people who've got no right to be here, but also that we do provide safe and legal means for people to come to the country. That is better. Nobody should ever transit across continents and transit across the Channel. The litigation point is important. There'll always be an element of that, it seems to me, in the Home Office. But I think we can pivot to a much better model, certainly through safe and legal means when we talk about community sponsorship as well. Communities coming forward in that positive way. We aren't in that place yet. We are moving to that model, and this is an important staging post on that journey.
Although I'm more than happy to have the Minister here for hours and hours, we have got other business to get on with, so I ask the backbenchers to make sure their questions are as short as they can be. Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
I thank the Minister for confirming that RAF Scampton is not cost effective. Frankly, he's been a lot more helpful than his predecessor, Conservative ministers who have left now the Conservative Party, so I thank him. The problem with these sites, as I know from asking hundreds of questions, is that they're unbelievably difficult to transform into an asylum centre. So can I ask the Minister, is this really a deterrent? If you come from a hellhole of a country, does it matter where you're going to be sent to? So can I be positive and ask a question in this way? Is the best way to solve this problem to process these asylum claimants very quickly, preferably within a month? There will be some who can't be sent back because their country is not safe. And surely the solution here is to create a return hub in a Council of Europe country, distant, small, so there's no question that their human rights would be abused. That is a real deterrent. Treat them quickly and then send them home.
On the point of processing, the issue, it seems to me, is not now initial decision-making. It's that we have a significant portion of people waiting for their appeal to be heard. There isn't a quick way to do that. You know, as I say, we've talked about appeals reform, and colleagues may see things from us shortly on that I hope we have their support on. He will have heard what my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has said in favour of returns hubs in the past as well. On the point on Scampton, you know, it's an important part of Lincoln and Lincolnshire's economic future, and I look forward to the sale of that site and the positive development of it in short order.
Jim Dixon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister for the statement and the clear objective of the government to ensure that hotels are eliminated from our asylum accommodation system and that military bases become a short-term stopgap. So can he reassure all of us that the government will continue to focus very closely on processing more quickly, on ensuring that people who aren't eligible to stay here are deported as soon as possible, so that actually the use of these military bases announced today and already up and running is actually a temporary measure and is done for as short a period as possible.
Yeah, I absolutely do agree with that. It's quicker processing, it's quicker removals, but what I would say, and I hope colleagues can hold in their heads, it is reducing pull factors too. The volumes last year of people seeking asylum were in the 90,000s. Between 2011 to 2020, it was in the 20,000s. That's part of the challenge here, and getting us down to a more steady state helps, exactly as he says, take out some of the very difficult choices that are having to be made.
While it is welcomed that the proposed use of Cameron Barracks in Inverness was ultimately abandoned, it came only after months of unnecessary uncertainty for local communities, following an announcement made without meaningful engagement with the Scottish Government, Highland Council or NHS Highland. Does the Minister accept that bypassing devolved partners and failing to consult local communities undermines confidence in the asylum system? Will he commit that any future decisions on asylum accommodation in Scotland will be made only after meaningful engagement with the Scottish Government, local authorities and local MPs? And will he acknowledge that while military sites may relieve immediate pressure on the system, they do not address the underlying failures driving the accommodation crisis, including slow decision-making, inadequate planning and a lack of suitable community-based housing options?
I'm grateful for that question. I'm very aware of the Scottish Government's new Scots programme, where it is the clear position of the Scottish Government that they want to see people from outside Scotland come to live there and be part of Scotland's economic future. I am committed to working with Scottish counterparts to make that reality. There is a challenge, because that sounds good in a global sense, but when it gets down to an individual sense, sometimes can seem less attractive. There are challenges in Scotland, particularly the fact that 60% of asylum seekers in Scotland are housed in Glasgow. There's an equity point there in Scotland that I think could change as well, but I absolutely will work with my Scottish counterparts. I've met with them and will continue to do so.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Government's closure of the asylum seeker hotel in Dudley, and it was a Conservative Party policy which was a complete waste of taxpayers' money. What steps is the Minister taking to reduce the asylum backlog and the dangerous illegal boat crossings?
Minister.
It's about quicker decision making. It's about the commitment we've made in appeals reform. It's about better collaboration with our European neighbours. Those are adding up to significant progress, which is why we've seen numbers fall. This is the next step to get us on the final leg of that journey.
Caroline Diamond.
The Minister spoke about necessary arrangements and approvals being followed, but Hasler Immigration Removal Centre proposals are meaningfully different from those originally planned. The Home Office is bypassing the local planning authority, Gosport Borough Council. The public consultation has been utterly derisory, utterly derisory. This is a residential urban area, but yet local people don't have any opportunity to have a say, because this is going to be decided by the Secretary of State in Whitehall. So I wonder if, leaving aside all the rhetoric, can he just answer some straight questions? Will he set out exactly how many people will now be housed at Hasler, who they will be, how long they will stay there, what opportunity will neighbouring residents have to influence this development and how it looks, and when will the Home Office have proper public meetings so that Gosport people can put their questions and have them answered? And will he meet with me to answer all the other questions that I'm getting from my residents who are furious about what the government is doing?
Minister.
Of course, I will meet with the Right Honourable Lady. I mean, this, of course, is an entirely separate thing, immigration removal centres, to what we're talking about here. I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but I'll get them to her in short order. There is a point of difference in terms of the engagement, as I can see from the correspondence we've had between us about what has been shared at public meetings and what hasn't, about the nature of the site. But let's have that conversation so that we're speaking with one version of the truth.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend will know that Bracknell has welcomed Afghans who supported our armed forces in transitional accommodation under the Afghan resettlement programme. But under the system introduced by the Conservatives, this isn't taken into account when considering a local area's ability to also deliver asylum accommodation. He'll know I've been lobbying him on this because small unitary authorities like Bracknell Forest can't be expected to do more than their fair share. Can he provide an update on progress?
I'm grateful for that question. He has doggedly pursued me on this very important issue. I think it is really important that as a Home Office we consider the broader context, such as in the way that he says with Afghan resettlement scheme provision, around a community's ability to sustain supported population and that full dispersal model that we inherited from our predecessors. What we have put in place in that attempt to close the gap between local government and national government is a postcode check process, so councils can say, well, hang on a minute, here is provision in this area that means this might not be suitable. We're going through that process in Bracknell at the minute, and I will work with him to hopefully get to a satisfactory conclusion.
James Cleverly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister keeps bragging about closing asylum hotel accommodations from their peak at 400. Can it be put on record that I closed 180 of those asylum hotels in 6 months, and the Labour government only closed another 30 in 2 years? I'd just like that read into the record. More broadly, These large-scale asylum accommodation centres have a detrimental effect on local communities. As we have seen in Wethersfield, people are unable to sell their houses, the number of children applying to go to the local primary school is dropping off, and it is now close to being financially untenable, which is why there was a time limit on the use of Wethersfield. We also know that when the numbers of people in these centres are too large, disruption happens, fights break out, which is why there was a cap on numbers. We learn that the government tried to sneak out over the weekend an increase on the cap and an extension to the time, completely undermining confidence of the people of Braintree, my constituency, in this government. Will the Minister now accept this is a completely unprofessional way of doing this? It is deeply unfair to the people of Wethersfield and the surrounding areas, and I urge him now, before it's too late, to rethink his proposals and scrap this foolish extension of both time and capacity at the Wethersfield Asylum Centre.
Minister.
I'm grateful for the right honourable gentleman's questions. It isn't bragging to say that under the previous government, the numbers of folks accommodated in hotels was 56,000 at its peak and is now at 21,000. It's important for the public to understand those changes. And he talks about record in government. He will know his own government's record at Wethersfield and the choices made there too. Now, in terms of capacity, he knows, because we've spoken about it, that Wethersfield exists normally in a steady state of around 850 with, as he says, the surge ability to operate at 1,250. Having had the numbers of years we've had at Wethersfield now, it is right to look at that to see how best that provision can operate. Those are conversations we will have. He will have his chance to go in studs up on me, which he never misses similarly, to come in and tell me what we ought to do differently. But it is right that we look at those things in the public interest, and that's what we're doing.
Perkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend's absolutely right to say that under the previous government, all we saw was this going in the wrong direction and the operation of government drawn to a standstill. Of course, we should never forget the role of the Right Honourable Member for Newark, who doesn't grace us with his presence in this hearing, but was very much the orchestrator of all of this. He is absolutely right to bring down all of those numbers heading in a positive direction, but he will know from the many times I've contacted him about the urgency of returning the Sandpiper Hotel in Chesterfield to its proper purpose. It's being massively underutilised now. So can he tell us when we're likely to see the Sandpiper, which has done its turn, being returned to proper use? And on the subject of the appeals, can you tell us any more about how we're going to make sure that those whose appeals have no serious prospect of succeeding can be expedited so that we don't have this appalling backlog in the appeals process also?
Quick reminder to colleagues when referencing other members, it's always best to let them know in advance. Minister.
Well, I would say in a general sense, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are a number of people now seeming in leadership position in the Reform Party, previously in the Tory Party, that had a significant agency over this. They now pretend to be concerned bystanders when actually they are the architects of the situation that we're in. I feel a little bit for some of the Conservative colleagues left to tidy that behind them, because at least they stand and take that question on as honourable colleagues have, honourable and right honourable colleagues have. On the point on the Sandpiper, I can't give a date to my honourable friend, but I would want to be clear to him and his community. It will not be open a day longer than needed to be. That is a vital community amenity that needs to be in its public use. And with regards to important reforms around appeals, he may not have to wait much longer to see more.
Tim Farron.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the use of hotels for warehousing asylum seekers is expensive for the taxpayer and utterly miserable for people who are stuck there seeking asylum, waiting for their cases to be heard. Does he, though, share my fear that the atmosphere of hostility towards those seeking asylum is hurting those who desperately need sanctuary? I've got an Iranian constituent who is a critic of the regime, a Christian convert, and therefore guilty of apostasy under Iranian law. By any stretch of the imagination, they cannot safely be returned to Iran, but they face just that fate unless their case is accepted. Would he look personally at this case and ensure more broadly that genuine refugees do not become victims of political posturing?
I would first of all recognise the fact that, having visited such hotels myself, these are not as advertised perhaps, or perhaps distorted by others, but the ultimate distorters are the human traffickers themselves, for whom it is a significant upside to say not only that the conditions are good, but they're easy to work illegally from. We have to change that reality. I am concerned, as I think all colleagues would be, about the public conversation here and the risk that often very vulnerable people and their neighbours carry. We're never far away from challenge in that space. It's incumbent on us to make sure that we don't play into that rhetoric. On the individual case, everybody's case will be heard individually on its merits, always. I can't promise to intercede in that individual case, but I can say that I'll ensure that the system is handled properly.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This decision looks like the politics of the past, not the politics of the future, made in Whitehall, not in our communities. But in 2002, RAF Linton was deemed unsuitable as a site because, as we've heard, the drainage and sewage system would need major restoration and input. There needs to be an upgrade in the power capacity. There are no amenities near the site, and the site has deteriorated since that decision. And of course, the inadequacy of public transport and other forms of transport really does stand out. In my human rights city, we rejected those proposals last time, and we worked cross-party in order to put forward that case. And people from Linton-on-Ouse have contacted me over the weekend as well, again, reinstating those reasons. So will he instead listen to local residents, listen to local authorities who City of York Council, who I've spoken to this afternoon, has said they've not been offered any resources or any planning or any engagement over this decision, yet Linton-on-Ouse faces to York and will have major implications, and instead ditch this plan, work with us as MPs and find an alternative way forward?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend's question. I mean, I'm well aware of York's status as a city of sanctuary. I, of course, would always want to work with the people of York in making sure that human rights city, forgive me, to make sure that people are humanely housed. Nevertheless, there is a challenge today that means that we have around the 100,000 mark in terms of a supported population. We have 170 hotels, give or take. We have to change that reality. There are limited options. I believe this is the best way forward, but I know from what she said and from what others have said, it will be incumbent on us to show that we can deliver it and deliver it in a way that is respectful of the local community. That is what we're seeking to do.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think what's missing from the statement, unless I've missed it myself, and that's the word deterrent. And the Minister suggests it's good news, which it is, on people moving out of hotels into other accommodation. But what he doesn't mention is that other accommodation also includes houses of multiple occupation. And there are only so many military sites that may or may not be available. So would he meet with me, given that I wrote to him on the 18th of June, to discuss Stoke Heath in my constituency, a village, I should say a rural settlement actually, of about 352 people, that is going to see up to 121 asylum seekers come into that rural settlement. No integrated services, very few public services at all. Nearest bus stop, for example, a 30-minute walk away. So would the Minister at least accept this, that a community meeting being held on Thursday, chaired by myself, should at least have somebody from the Home Office or Serco in attendance? People are being kept in the dark, secrecy, no consultation, no transparency. People have a right to know what's going on. Would he encourage a member of Serco to come along to that meeting and answer some of those local community concerns?
I'm grateful for the question. I'm well aware, because the Honourable Gentleman has pressed hard, both verbally and in writing, on Stoke Heath already. I, of course, will have that meeting with him that he asked. I didn't use the word deterrent, but I did use the word pull factors, which I was using in the same context. We have to change the reality in terms of the differential attractiveness that's seen applications for asylum in this country go up whilst going down across the EU. This is part of that programme. With regards to his meeting, let me talk to the department and see what we can do to make sure he can have the fullest discussion possible.
Andrew Pace.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Minister's statement and the serious attempt by this government to get the backlogs down, change the system and get the use of hotels reduced. Peterborough is a warm, generous place, but we already do our fair share for looking after asylum seekers. My real fear in this, and I ask the Minister to consider this, is the broken trust we have, because too many people in places like mine, myself included, think the system is rigged by suppliers like Serco, who pick the cheapest places to put asylum seekers. When I was elected, based on the record of the party opposite, Peterborough already had the highest number of asylum seekers in the region. After the general election, Serco opened the Dragonfly Hotel under this government with no consultation, no knowledge from myself or my neighbouring MP, no knowledge by the council, no knowledge by the police, no knowledge by any local services, which has put us in a really difficult position. Now, I know that we are bringing those numbers in the Dragonfly Hotel down. I know he won't be able to tell me the specific date he can shut it now. But what can you tell us about how we can keep control of these monsters like Serco, which drive this policy and mean places like mine feel the system is rigged and left out and left behind?
I'm grateful for my honourable gentleman's contribution, his continued lobby in this space. I can't give him, as he says, a date for the Dragonfly's closure. I can tell him that it's something that's uppermost in my mind, and the Dragonfly will close as soon as we physically can do it. In terms of the system, we are trying to close that gap between those who administrate the asylum accommodation contracts and local government, and crucially through our leadership. Frankly, the responsibility is mine and ministers rather than the providers. The contract is not a good contract. Let's be clear about that. Again, I don't blame predecessor ministers that let that in 2019, but we are seeking, through the process that we're now under in renewing that contracts in 2029, to change that model. I would say, as I always do, that I'd municipalise everything. I don't think that's our reality at the moment, but I do want a more mixed economy, so it's more sympathetic to communities, and there is greater agency in the system, and that's what we're going to do.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The honourable gentleman, who is a diligent and sensible minister, will understand the deep disappointment in the royal town of Sutton Coldfield that the Ramada Hotel on Penn's Lane was not included in the recent list of closure, not least because it was on the list for closure before the general election. The Minister was very generous with his time to see me and listen to why the Ramada location is totally inappropriate in Sutton Coldfield. Can you reassure me that this facility will now be closed as soon as possible?
I'm grateful for that question. He knows my enthusiasm for Royal Sutton Coldfield and the strength, I think, in their Plan for Neighbourhoods programme in a predecessor, and much happier, I might say, engagement that I had with him on that. I did wince when his number came up the other day, because I knew he would be pressing hard as to why it wasn't his hotel that closed. I can assure him we will close it as soon as possible, and how important it is that that is returned back to the people of Royal Sutton Coldfield for their births, for their marriages, for their funerals, and all sorts of those things that make life what it is.
Alex Ballinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week we heard the very welcome news that the final asylum hotel in Dudley Borough has closed. Of course, the system set up by the Conservatives was a complete failure, very inappropriate to house people in town centres, extremely costly for the taxpayer, and I am very pleased that the Labour government is the government that is finally sorting this out. Part of the problem, or part of the solution, I should say, is deportations of people with no right to be here. So can the Minister outline how many people we've deported since the election, and also what further steps we are taking to sort out returns agreements for other countries where we are struggling to do so?
I absolutely can, and I'm pleased for the good news for Dudley. We've removed 67,000 people with no right to be here since the election, a significant increase, approaching 30% increase on the equivalent period under our predecessors, but we must go further. We've secured a number of extra returns agreements. I want returns agreements around the world because they're the building blocks for safe removal. We also need more detention capacity. That, again, was something left by our predecessors at much thinner than we need to be able to effect the removals at the level that we expect to see. So I'm pleased with the progress we've made, but there is much, much more to do.
Gary Wilson.
People have a right to be angry that the government has sought to impose hundreds of asylum seekers into their communities without consultation. The Minister's talked today about the deterrent factor. Is it not a fact that if we spend billions on accommodating people, then we support them financially, then we give them services which many local people wouldn't be able to get, and then when their cases are looked at, 90% of them are granted asylum? Is that not a pull factor which brings people to the United Kingdom? And is the way to deal with it not to simply make it clear, come into the country illegally, and it doesn't matter how good your case is, you will not be granted asylum?
I mean, first of all, the idea of 90% grant rate is for the birds. It's not even half that. Also, the idea that people who are accommodated in hotels are living a luxury lifestyle, the reality is that's far from the case. These aren't great places to be. They are safe, they're humane, they're dignified and they're legal, but that is it. So the idea that it's a great time, I just cannot accept it. It simply isn't true. But what I would say is the traffickers exploit the idea of living in a hotel and especially working illegally. That's the reality we have to change there. That's how we get to an order and control system. That's how we reduce demand back to a normal level.
Ms Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for coming to the House today and his statement and also the work he's doing on tackling this really important issue. As my Harlow constituency borders Epping, I'm not unaware of the challenges asylum hotels and the activity surrounding them poses for communities, and I thank him for the work he's done on that particular issue. But isn't the reality that the asylum backlog that was left by the previous government is the key issue, and can he talk about what this government is doing to bring down that backlog and also deal with the issue of appeals, as he's mentioned in previous answers?
Yes, I mean, the backlog is one of the major sins that explains quite how the supported population is so much more than we would be expecting it to be. So we've got through that backlog in initial decision-making. The pressure is now in the appeals system, and that's why, as we said in the King's speech, with important reforms coming to the appeals system. As I say, colleagues may get to see that at some point shortly.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The site identified at MOD Bicester sits just over the Buckinghamshire border into Oxfordshire and is incredibly close to villages in my constituency like Borstal, Oakley, Longcrendon, Marshgibbon, Ludgershall, Twyford, Chandon and others. I can assure the Minister from comments I've had from constituents over the weekend that nobody thinks that this is a good site for such a centre. And can I particularly pick up the answer he gave to Honourable Member earlier about medical provision on these sites, where he said that medical provision is provided on site. I know from bitter experience from an asylum hotel in the last Parliament that that pressure was delivered on site, but by a local GP practice who then couldn't serve in the normal timely manner everybody else in the area. So can he be really clear, given that he can't magic up doctors and primary care, that if this site goes ahead, and I hope it doesn't, that there won't be pressure on local GP services in my constituency in Mid-Buckinghamshire, or indeed on the Oxfordshire side?
Minister.
Well, we've had success on other large sites of exactly that not being the case. Individuals need to register with the GP, but it is our intention for the impact on local health service to be absolutely minimum. There is a question in emergency medicine. Of course, there's not going to be emergency medicine provision on site, but exactly I appreciate that that is a test the Honourable Gentleman is setting and one I very much want to meet.
Helen Morgan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I also raise my concerns about the site at Stoke Heath mentioned by the Right Honourable Gentleman for the Wrekin? It's a really rural location. Its nearest town is Market Drayton in my constituency, and people there are very concerned about the appropriateness of the site, with it being 30 minutes walk from a bus stop. There's no shop there, and Shropshire Council have raised their concerns about that remoteness. Given that we've seen increasing far-right infiltration in Shropshire from people beyond the constituency borders on Facebook, spreading misinformation and hatred, I'm very concerned about the security of the people in this development at Stoke Heath. So can he tell me what measures are being taken to keep those people safe, and can he also explain what the criteria are for a suitable location for this type of dispersal accommodation? Because it seems to me that somewhere not even with a bus stop or a shop is a really inappropriate place.
Minister.
I'm grateful for that question, and I will mirror my commitment to the Honourable Gentleman in terms of making sure on Stoke Heath that the Honourable Lady gets whatever information she needs. With regards to how sites are chosen, I mean, there is a mix there of which local amenities is part of it, travel, transport and all those things too. Those are carefully looked at before providers bring ideas forward. If a local authority has a challenge with it, they can bring it to the Home Office for adjudication, where all those factors are considered together.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With 76,000 illegal crossings in the last 2 years, this is clearly a problem that continues to affect our country and has very profound social and economic consequences, largely negative ones on communities across the country. So with the government talking about a new approach to move this problem away from communities, I was surprised to read the other day about the specific refugee scheme that was reported in various media outlets. Surely this is something that is going to increase the attractiveness of illegal migration via illegal routes. Anyone who travels to the UK via an illegal route should be deported. This is a contribution to the pull factor, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
I can help the honourable gentleman very clearly there. The whole point on safe and legal routes is that those aren't the means by which people come to the country. So, the point, as the honourable gentleman will have seen in the commitments we made in November in the asylum policy statement, is if people choose to come via regular means, then their route to settlement will be a very long one indeed, with a 30-month renewal of that protection. What we're trying to do is change those behaviours in exactly, I think, the way he and I both want.
Ayub Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've spoken to many asylum seekers who have endured some of the most horrific and atrocious life experiences. The Minister will know that historically the courts have deemed an army barrack as unlawful because of the inhumane conditions within it. So what assessment has the Minister made in terms of suitability of the new barracks which are being considered? But isn't the real issue the processing of these asylum cases? And will the Minister consider, I know that the Minister said 24 months high, but there's no figures here as to how many applications have been processed, how many applications are actually waiting, not including the ones at the appeal courts.
First of all, I'll take the point on lawfulness. We currently, this very minute, are operating two schemes very lawfully. On the point of quality, I would say that for many of these sites, certainly for other ones we brought forward in the past, they've been good enough for the resettlement of Afghan families, and indeed they've been good enough for our own soldiers. So the idea, I think, that they're not good enough, I would contest that. The processing point is important, but as I say, we've got through functionally through that backlog. The issue is now the issue is now that is in the appeal system, and the statistic is a 58-week wait. Processing is important, yes, but so is the reduction of demand, because, as I say, we're operating at 3 times the level we would have been operating a decade ago. We have to change that reality. This is part of that.
Sir Ashley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister appreciate that the reason he is commissioning former army bases and spending millions of pounds on more asylum accommodation is that his government's policy of smashing the gangs has completely failed? There have been 76,000 illegal crossings across the Channel into our country. And until he accepts that those are economic migrants who should be deported when they arrive in our country, this problem will continue.
The fact is that they don't bear that out. We have a system that separates those who are travelling economically and those who are seeking protection. I don't want this country to lose its proud history of providing protection for people who need it. That's why we're doing the way we're doing. But in terms of control of the system, we've made significant step forward with our French counterparts. That's why, actually, for the first time, we're seeing some of those asylum applications actually coming down, as well as some positive progress, as my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, said in the Channel as well. Of course, the traffickers had 6 years of head start on us, but unless I'm mistaken, which I really don't think I am, it can't have felt like failure when we closed the hotel in the honourable gentleman's constituency.
Minister.
The Minister said that the business of this government was to secure the borders of this nation. In that context, can I therefore ask him, since this government came to power 2 years ago, how many of the buses travelling through the open back door in the United Kingdom from the Irish Republic have ever been stopped, those who are seeking asylum, their credentials checked, because we all know what happened a few weeks ago in North Belfast, where an asylum seeker is now in custody for attempted murder. And yet there's been no effort by this government to close that back door. Why is that? Why are we allowing people unchecked to enter this United Kingdom? We talk about stopping the small boats. When are we going to stop the buses?
The honourable gentleman makes an important point. I can't wholly agree with what he said, but this is important. As we win that battle in the Channel, the Common Travel Area, which obviously is an arrangement of very long standing indeed, will be a point of challenge. I am working closely. I've spoken to both the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister on this point. That work is ongoing to keep that common travel areas protected as possible. We, of course, work with the Government of Ireland as well. And you know, that collective work is how we make sure the CTA is not exploited.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Mercure Hotel in De Vries is home to around 100 men of uncertain origin, and thanks to the good offices of the Home Office I've been able to visit. However, I've not been able to get any clarity on the criteria for closure, and certainly not on any kind of timescale for closure. Can the Minister, without recourse to "we will close it in due course," which was beginning to sound a little bit like the old jibe about the First World War, it'll be over by Christmas, we just can't tell you which Christmas, can he offer us a bit more clarity on when these hotels are going to be closed?
Minister.
I think that's slightly unfair. The Honourable Gentleman knows they will all close by 2029. But within that, none of them will open for a day longer than they need to be. In terms of criteria, it is a range of factors, including size, including condition, including location, all of which goes into them making a decision. I appreciate that in a process of closing, you know, from a couple of hundred hotels to nil, everybody would want to be the first one. All of them will close.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his statement and for his very clear commitment to address the issues that can't be in doubt. This continues to be a massive issue in my constituency of Strangford, indeed across all of Northern Ireland. The shifting of thousands of individuals out of hotels and into large-scale alternative accommodation sites, such as military barracks, vessels, repurposed institutional facilities, is not a solution. It is simply moving a massive, expensive problem from one community's doorstep to another. So can I ask the Minister this? When will government stop managing the symptoms of illegal immigration and start deploying the robust enforcement, rapid detentions and immediate deportations needed to secure our borders and end this accommodation crisis once and for all? Thank you so much.
Minister.
It's rare that I disagree wholeheartedly with the Honourable Gentleman. His incredible work on the persecution of Christians abroad, for example, is one that I share with him, that shows the importance actually of having managed but humane asylum systems around the world. That's what we must have in this country. But I also didn't take from what he said that we're actually that far apart. You know, he talks about the cost, he talked in financial terms, he talks about the cost in terms of community terms. I share this. These types of schemes are part of changing that reality, because it's part of reducing the pull factors so that people aren't tempted or exploited by traffickers to do so. I think that that's the right balance.
It is deeply disappointing that I have to remind the Minister and the Treasury front bench Chapter 9.1 of the Ministerial Code and 19.21 of Erskine May make it clear that statements on important matters should be made to this House first. This House first. Not made to the press at 10:30 p.m. on a Thursday night, and that's when MPs and their constituents hear about important policy news, not this House first. And I expect much better from the Minister. It is totally unacceptable that constituents and MPs hear about important policy matters on the news and not in this House. And we, myself as a constituency MP impacted, and members and our constituents deserve much better. Minister, we need to see better from you on this. OK, if they want to shuffle over, I can get on to the next bit of business. Yes. If we are ready, presentation of bills, Tim Farron.
Water Regulation Bill.
A second reading what day?
4th of December.
Friday the 4th.
Friday the 4th of December.
Friday the 4th of December. If the front benches are ready, we now come to the motion on the estimate for the Cabinet Office. I call the Minister to move the motion formally. Formally, Madam Deputy Speaker. Are you? Is she not speaking? The question is as on the order paper. The debate will be opened by the Chair of the Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy, Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I first express my thanks to the Backbench Business Committee for granting this debate. It could not be more timely given the crucial NATO summit which is taking place next week in Ankara. And I was hoping that we would be inundated with contributions from across the House, but sadly I think we might be limited to one or two. You know, keeping the country safe is the first responsibility of any government. The Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy, which I chair, has undertaken a huge amount of work this Parliament to examine the government's approach to protecting the UK's national security interests. From critical national infrastructure to the defence of our very democracy, our committee has been working hard to highlight areas in vital need of improvement. There is no one national security department, of course, but the Cabinet Office coordinates the government's approach to national security. Indeed, it is the home of the National Security Secretariat. The Cabinet Office's main estimate states that it is planning to spend about 1.1 billion on day-to-day running costs and 600 million on investment projects. Out of this, around 200 million pounds for day-to-day costs and 25 million for investment will go towards keeping the country safe. But national security is, at its core, a whole of government responsibility. And because of this, it is often difficult to get a handle on how much is being spent on the UK's security and resilience, a point that I made to the Backbench Business Committee. The case for increased spending on security and resilience in an era of unprecedented uncertainty and hybrid warfare could not be stronger. We see a proliferation of threats coming not just from hostile state actors, but organised proxy groups and radicalised individuals. Take the cyber attack on Jaguar Land Rover in August 2025, which the New York Times has now reported were Russian in origin, and which the evidence suggests that either the Kremlin was directly responsible or responsible for facilitating it through proxy actors. The impact of that cyber attack was severe. It cost the British economy £2.5 billion and directly cost Jaguar Land Rover £485 million in the quarter itself and affected over 5,000 firms. It was so significant that it actually impacted on our growth figures for that quarter. Threats are increasingly facilitated through the weaponisation of emerging technologies such as AI and quantum. And those who would seek to destabilise our democracy, our safety and our way of life have more opportunities than ever before to do so. And they know that. Meanwhile, the government and NATO allies have already acknowledged this reality with their commitment to spend 5% of GDP on defence by 2035, with 1.5% of this being earmarked for security and resilience. I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does my honourable friend believe, like myself, that Russian hybrid warfare that we're seeing actually in the UK at the moment is further fuelling disinformation, for example, online? We know that the arson attack on the Prime Minister's car was directly linked to Russian state operatives, and so if there ever was a moment where we really needed to stipulate a budget specifically for this, then now is that moment. Yeah.
Well, I thank the honourable member for her intervention. It is such an important point, and I really don't think we as a chamber have given that enough airtime. I think it was such a critical thing. You think about any other premier of any other country that would have been attacked like that, their home attacked, their car set on fire. I mean, really, I think the reaction from the media was really quite muted, and I think now that it's become more obvious what has happened, despite all the nonsense that circulated at that time through social media, it's really important that conversation comes out. Because we are at a crucial juncture, as the honourable member was suggesting. We are running out of time to ensure that we are prepared for a worst case scenario that sees increasing Russian aggression, both conventional and hybrid, at a time when the United States' security presence in Europe is being questioned. The threat from China looms ever larger, and the UK finds itself in a difficult position as a middle power in the midst of global strategic competition between the United States and China. It is imperative, as such, that the government is robustly held to account in delivering its spending commitments on defence, security and resilience. I will give way.
Can I commend him for his introduction and for his very wise words? Ever mindful of the modern warfare and the way it's going, the changes that obviously we as a government and as a nation need to be prepared for. Does the honourable gentleman believe that within the estimates that we have here tonight, the very issue of the resilience when it comes to drone technology, how to use that to the betterment and the safety and the security of this country, does he believe we are at the top of that tree to ensure that we can protect our people across this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The point my honourable friend makes is absolutely right. The nature of our security is so multifaceted now in a way that it wouldn't have been 30 years ago. And we have to recognise, and I'm sure the government does, and globally we're beginning to get our heads around just how we need to pivot and reset ourselves into a very different defence and security posture, because our defence is as much on our mobile phone or our laptops and our way of life, our democracy, as it is actually at our borders, and that is a crucial thing. My committee was encouraged to hear from the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster that the government believes it is on track to hit this target by 2027, well ahead of time. That's 1.5% of GDP on security and resilience by 2035. But the government has also been, if I may say, evasive in exactly what this spend will entail. Like any target, there is a risk of exercise rather than representing genuine additional funding. And my committee recommended that the spending must prioritise investment in systems that can help build long-term resilience, in addition to spending on maintenance of basic civil infrastructure. When we questioned the Minister, we sought to clarify what new resilience projects and capabilities the 1.5% would entail. We were given, I'm afraid to say, only vague answers. The government's response to our report on the National Security Strategy disappointingly failed to elucidate much further. We recognise there are reasons for being protective about certain information and not disclosing too much detail, but we would just seek more specificity in exactly how the government is making critical infrastructure in the UK more resilient through this spending. In fact, I recently met with the High Commissioner of Canada, who explained that they're investing hundreds of millions in large-scale infrastructure projects in their high north, be it railways, road networks or deep-sea ports. They are all planned to boost resilience across the nation.
Will my honourable friend give way on that point?
I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I too was recently in Canada with the Business and Trade Select Committee, and they talked significantly about the infrastructure projects they're invested in. Beyond that, they talked about the Canada Strong policy, which is about supporting industries in Canada and making sure that money being spent to the benefit of public good is being spent with Canadian companies. So does my honourable friend agree with me that the reforms made by the Cabinet Office in March, the procurement reforms, are some of the most significant we've seen in a generation and should benefit British industry?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention. She's absolutely right. I haven't been to Canada, certainly in recent decades, but what I'm hearing is the approach that they are adopting is something that I think should be of real interest to us, and how they are prioritising certain sectors, how they've identified certain capabilities, and whilst they are very protective about what those capabilities might be, I would certainly welcome conversations behind closed doors with government ministers about what it is that we're looking to do in a similar vein. She's absolutely right. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's striking that they are outlining their major projects and how they'll spend their money, but they're also focusing, as I say, on their capabilities. Here we have suffered from a lack of long-term commitment to investing in national security and preparedness. Our government must also clearly outline what additional capabilities it is committed to developing through the target spend prior to the start of the NATO summit next week. Madam Deputy Speaker, we need a national conversation about our nation's defence and security. Over the last 18 months, my committee has heard repeatedly about the need to get the public on board when it comes to increased spending on defence, resilience and security. And with the public purse under such strain, our constituents need to understand why spending on such areas must be prioritised. And I'll give way. I will give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, because I also recently met with the ambassador for Canada, and to the other honourable member's point, she was stating that one of the reasons for the infrastructure in the High North was also so that there was something to defend in terms of sovereignty, which is incredibly important. But he also explained how, in selling it to the general public, when most people talk about defence, they think about different toys and bullets and ships like that, whereas actually what they were doing in Canada was more about talking about defence and the need to actually invest in this, so we have something to defend, which is all about for our country, for the jobs, for industry, for everything else. So does my honourable member agree that this is an important message that we should also get out to UK residents as well? Yeah.
Well, as if on cue, the point that she makes is the one that I am just about to develop. So the Strategic Defence Review called for a national conversation, and during our inquiry on societal resilience, we have heard much about how our allies are engaging their citizens with this essential work. The UK is, I'm afraid, a little behind the curve. Beyond the Baltic and Scandinavian nations, whose security and resilience is well documented, other nations are also moving up a gear. Their governments engage significant numbers of military reserves, volunteers, firefighters, private defence organisations and NGOs in that conversation. In certain countries, everyone between the ages of 18 and 65 has a role in resilience. Every single person. Some countries conduct wargaming exercises on civilian defence to identify weaknesses in their systems. Now, less obvious countries, such as the Netherlands and Canada, as I've just mentioned, are making painful choices necessary to ensure societal resilience can be strengthened. The situation warrants a reset of our whole approach to resilience and security, but to do that, you must bring the public with you through a national conversation. I will give way.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for giving way, and it's been my huge pleasure to serve on his committee for the better part of the last 2 years, and as I stand down from that committee, I'd like to thank him for his leadership of it. It has been exemplary. On the point of the whole society conversation, though, to go back to his earlier point about the incident with the Prime Minister's car, does he not agree that we need to do a better job of informing the British public of the actual threat? Because the first stage is getting the public to understand the real threat that we are facing right now, that we are under hybrid attack, because we are going to need the whole of society to support us in the solution.
Matt Weston.
I thank the honourable member, who I would also call a friend, and I thank him also, not just for his kind words, but also particularly for his really valuable contributions over the last 18 months or so to the committee. I mean, yes, it is vital that we do engage the public, and I think it is incumbent on our media to actually start spelling some of this stuff out. Not fear-mongering, but actually just explaining some of the harsh realities of what we face, and that there are certain nations who wish us absolute harm, that we are their public enemy number one, and we need to be really, I think, much more open in that discourse with the public, so that they really get not sort of to be overly alarmed as I may have been back when I was a kid growing up, but recognizing that this is actually the sorts of pressures we're facing economically, socially, and militarily. The situation, as I was saying, really demands that we bring the public along with us, and we have discussed it with the committee about how we develop this nationwide conversation, possibly even including an education programme, by being more honest with the public about the threats that the UK faces. The pandemic indeed highlighted huge gaps in our country and society's resilience. I have to ask, are we really ready for the next crisis that might be heading our way? As I say, we must not fearmonger, but the government must learn all it can from our allies who are further ahead of us when it comes to spending on resilience and preparedness. And I want to stress that this situation was obvious, I think, to the last government too. It is increasingly clear that for too long the UK has outsourced its security and resilience needs elsewhere and is now entirely dependent on others for critical elements of its infrastructure. It is only through increasing the scale of investment in its sovereign capabilities, particularly in the realm of emerging technologies, that we can wean ourselves off these dependencies. The Defence Investment Plan is therefore crucial, and it's essential in guiding businesses and investors. Direction is needed, so is dynamism and agility. At a time when UK firms need certainty, we still lack clarity on exactly how investment will be allocated. And as we highlighted in our report on national security strategy, the longer businesses lack an adequate signal from government about what investment might be on the way, the more vulnerable they are to acquisition by foreign investors, and the more difficult it becomes to achieve our sovereignty goals. The government has made steps in the right direction through investments as part of the AI Opportunities Action Plan and the work of the Sovereign AI Unit. That's to be commended. The UK has a strong base of talent in these technologies, but the government needs to go further and faster to secure our advantage long term. Now is the time to secure the investment, the jobs and economic security we need through a proper digital sovereignty strategy. Because as we saw last week in the series of cyber attacks, economic security, Madam Deputy Speaker, is national security. The Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy will continue, Madam Deputy Speaker, to fulfil its role and press the government on all these points and more in a constructive and collaborative way, as it has done these last 18 months. But it is only through robust challenge and scrutiny that we can ensure the government is doing all it can to keep the people, businesses and critical systems of the UK safe and secure. As Lord Robertson of Port Ellen told the committee earlier this year, it is much better to pay for deterrence than to pay for war. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is also ultimately less costly. I urge the government to take heed. Thank you.
Dr. Anychan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for introducing this debate so well. He makes many excellent points, including the fact that we face a very wide range of threats to our security and resilience. Clearly, we face threats from hostile actors and not just through conventional means. He's talked about cyber warfare. We've talked about the threat of disinformation. He also briefly touched on the effects of the pandemic on our country. And I would point out that, of course, the greatest threat to human health in our history for many, many decades is, of course, the COVID pandemic, which killed nearly 250,000 people. Now, recognising pandemic preparedness as hugely important within the security and resilience framework is absolutely key. But the particular thing that I want to speak about today is another key threat to our country's security and resilience, which does not receive nearly enough attention, and that is climate breakdown. It's not just the environmentalists who say this, it's the ambulance workers, it's the Joint Intelligence and Security Committee's National Security Assessment, which itself says that ecosystem breakdown poses a clear threat to national security. And of course, the Committee on Climate Change has pointed out that we are woefully ill-prepared as a country for the effects of climate breakdown. We urgently need to take more action to avoid causing climate change. We equally urgently need to take far more action to recognise the threat to our national security and resilience posed by the effects of climate breakdown. And this was brought home to us in hugely clear terms last week as we faced the second major heat wave of the last month or so, a heat wave which led to record call-outs for the ambulance service more than ever before, more even than under COVID. Just a couple of weeks ago, I spent time with London Ambulance Service. They told me then that the May heat wave was their highest number of ambulance call-outs, even including COVID, and that terrible record was exceeded last week. We have to recognise the reality of the effects on human life, and livelihoods and our national security and resilience caused by these issues. And it's not just